Welcome back to the Weird Bible Podcast, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Aidan Mattis. This is Aidan Thornbury, and that over there is a man who is recently engaged.
Yes, I am. I am now Beyonce Goon. That doesn't work.
Beyonce Goon?
Wenda Once. Yes, bring it over.
Once.
He has the drill. That Wendy Once. Yeah, that's it. Here's the gem itself. Yes, the ring.
And on the gem, a ring.
Yes, so now, after she's just a prop for me to show this off. She's my placeholder. So now, I was telling Thornberry before the show started, like, I have done the thing that every man freaks out and fears about.
Mm-hmm.
So I've done that, so I need a new existential crisis.
Yeah.
Keep me up at night, so.
It seems it went well.
The
new existential crisis is everything else that's happening in the world right now.
Yep. Hopefully you have a little limbo period before that kicks in.
Sure. Yeah, well, I'll just jump to death or something.
You guys need
like
at least a couple of years before World War III starts, right?
Yeah. I need one son to carry on.
To carry on the goon name.
Yes.
Yeah. So that I can die horrifically in some armed conflict in Europe.
Exactly, precisely.
Goon Jr.
As every man is
every
supposed
good
to
American should.
Yeah, precisely.
The true act of patriotism.
So, it's like that scene in Jarhead when the drill instructor's like, "Was your daddy in Vietnam?" "Sir, yes, sir." "Was he man enough to die over there?" "Sir, no,
Good
sir."
Lord. Oh boy, that is a hell of a. Oh my God. Okay.
What a movie.
All right. Well, before we actually get into today's content, we had a discussion about super chats.
Yes.
Because, good Lord. So
Suffering from our own success.
Yes.
So for this episode, we are going to prioritize super chats that are actually questions, first and foremost, about the topic at hand. And then from there, comments that are about the topic at hand. And then if we have time after that, we'll get to the more miscellaneous kind of stuff. So Aiden's going to be over here, making the decision about what gets read based on...
I'm going to start a Google Doc.
Yeah, he's kind of the audience surrogate on this show as the one who, has not studied this as extensively.
Correct.
So...
Yes. Bold of you to assume studied it all. No, that's fair. I did go to religious school, so I got something.
Might make it worse, actually.
Fair. You've got a great
I'm so stupid. I was on the Weird Bible channel. Like, where's the live stream? Is Aiden just talking into the nothingness? No, it's on the Lore Lodge.
Yeah. So what happened there? What happened there was that I went to schedule the stream, and apparently, the first time you stream on a YouTube channel, it just makes you wait 24 hours for some reason.
That's right. I forgot about that. Yep.
Was not aware of that. Don't remember that from when we started this channel.
No, nor do I.
I don't know if maybe that's a new thing.
I think that's a new policy change because people who were making they would stream inappropriate content, so they just make a new account and then just stream on that one.
Gotcha.
Immediately, like crypto scams and stuff like that.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Dude.
What?
Why do you spell weird that way?
What do you mean? Oh, sorry, I misspelled it.
Like, he spelled weird with the I before the E.
Well, I typed it without
looking. I before E, except after C, and weird, because it's a weird word.
Yep.
I don't remember the rest of the
Y.
rhyme.
I don't know.
What? No, that's vowels.
Yeah, I know. I was just throwing it out there to see.
I guess all of them are vowels. Anyway, the topic today, we're talking about the rise and fall of King Saul and how that led to the rise of King David, because this is probably going to be a three-parter by the time we get to David and Psalms.
Fair.
But yeah, so where we left off in the last episode, the age of judges is coming to an end. Samuel is a prophet. He is the prophet trained by Eli, one of the high priests. And the situation in Israel is that Israel is not yet a kingdom. It is a collection of tribes living in the deserts between the Ammonites and the Philistines. So this is the area primarily around Jerusalem, but Jerusalem is not an actual Israelite city at this point in time. We're talking about around the year 1000 AD, probably just the decade or two before it. And prior to everything, the events in Samuel, the Israelites have really been struggling to follow the rules, follow the laws. You've got all of these different judges. You've got all of these different people who really just fail to do what they were instructed to do. And the Israelites finally say, you know what, we can't do the judges. How about you give us a king? Everybody else has a king. And Samuel doesn't like this. God also doesn't like this, but he chooses, you know what, I'm going to respect it. And the result is that while out searching for some donkeys, a guy named Saul, who is the tallest and most handsome man in all of Israel, of the lowliest family of the lowliest of the 12 tribes, the tribe of Benjamin, he is chosen. And he's chosen for the specific reason that he is nothing. He is, as far as being of noble birth goes, he is as low as you can possibly get. Of course, Benjamin is eventually the only of the 12 tribes that sides with Judah in forming the kingdom of Judah. The rest of them go with Israel and end up worshiping other gods, and there's a whole thing there. But Benjamin does eventually become a very prominent tribe because of that decision. But at the time, they're really nothing. They have very little land, very little property, very little wealth. And that's why you have the son of one of the noble families going off looking for a bunch of lost donkeys instead of a group of servants. And what happens is they end up completely losing track of the donkeys. They hear about a seer, a holy man who they can ask. They go and they find Samuel. They ask Samuel for help, and he tells them, oh yeah, don't worry about the donkeys, they're found, but come have dinner with me tonight. He goes and has dinner, and Samuel's like, oh, by the way, you're going to be king of Israel now. And Saul kind of goes, all right. Cool. And that brings us to the actual moment where Saul actually is called. It's in Samuel 10, I want to say, where everybody gets called to Mizpah. That's what it is, right?
Mizpah, yeah.
Yeah, Mizpah. Everybody gets called there, and the terminology that we get is we want all the tribes and all of them in their thousands. They arrive, and Samuel calls up the tribe of Benjamin, and then he calls up the house of Kish, and then he finally says, all right, it's this guy, Saul. And everyone goes, where is he? Well, you see, Saul hath hidden himself among the stuff, which is the actual biblical terminology. Saul has hidden himself among the stuff. There will be a t-shirt, sweatshirt with that on it, just like Pity for the Gourd. Just so you guys know, that will be up on the merch store tonight.
I just want to know what the Hebrew word for stuff is.
That is a good point. I left my interlinear in the other room. Otherwise, I'd go find it. Maybe on the back we'll have the actual Hebrew.
That'd be great.
Or it'll just be the Hebrew word stuff on the shirt.
Only for those in the know.
Exactly.
It looks like some like deep, meaningful thing like spirit or God, and what's that mean? Stuff.
And then of course, well, what stuff? No, like stuff. It means stuff.
Like,
Just
that's
stuff.
it. That's all there is.
That is one of my favorite things about the King James version of the Bible is that occasionally you just come across something where they tried their best. It's this eloquent, poetic version of the Bible. It does a great job of keeping the original meaning of all of the words while also displaying them in a form that's eloquent to read. And then every once in a while, stuff.
Yep.
I just find it funny.
The boxes.
Yeah. So
Bags.
Saul is eventually found. They drag him out from among the stuff, and they crown him king. And the very first thing Saul gets to do upon being king, at least the very first thing that we're told about, is that a tribe just over the Jordan, a group of people who I don't believe the tribe is named, but the city is. It's not Gilead. I had it a second ago. Do you know what I'm talking about?
The Hill of God, the one with the Philistines.
I'll be there in a second.
Thou shalt meet a company of prophets. I'm reading through chapter 10 right now.
No, I'm talking about after all that when he goes to fight. Here we go. Yeah. Then Nahash the Ammonite came up and encamped against Jabesh Gilead, and the men of Jabesh said unto Nahash, "Make a covenant with us, and we will serve thee." So, Isaiah, do you recall what the covenant is?
So, if I recall correctly, because Saul makes a few covenants that don't go well in the end, is this the covenant? Hold up, let me make sure that I thrust your eyes. Give us 7 days respite that we may send messengers in all the coasts. If there be no man to save us, we will come out to thee. So, in other words, effectively give us 7 days.
Yeah.
Send our messengers out to see if we can get word from the men around us. Yes.
Exactly. And the covenant that Nahash basically Nahash's version of this is, all right, well, if no help comes, you guys have to serve me, and I'm taking all of your right eyes. The reasoning given is that the right eye is more important to combat because the left eye is usually behind the shield. This tells you this is where the Bible's a fun historical document, because it tells you something about the way that combat worked around 1000 BC. Because if you look at, for example, Greek hoplites, or hoplites, to use the actual correct pronunciation before somebody gets on my case, they would stack their shields across each other. The placement of the eyes didn't really matter, because most of the time they were wearing helmets. So they would typically have their eyes above the shield or maybe out to the side. You get further and further into the world of combat as time goes on, and weaponry and armor become more important. This tells us that the shield was an incredibly important aspect of the battle array, the panoply. And it also tells us that they probably didn't wear armor that much. Because if you're wearing a helmet, you're not super concerned about keeping both your eyes behind your shield. Whereas if you're not wearing a helmet, suddenly it becomes very important that the only part of your face that is outside of the shield is the part you need to just vaguely see. So it tells us a bit about how they were fighting wars back then. Of course, Saul calls upon him. The messengers get out, they get to Saul, and Saul has a moment to really shine. And he shows that he is very much capable of getting Israel to follow his lead. He sends an oxen in pieces to all 12 tribes and says, if you don't come follow me to go help Gilead, I'm going to do this to all your oxen. Which, it's kind of rule by fear, but it works. And then...
To each their own.
Exactly, it's sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do. And so he calls up his men, and the numbers we get here are what intrigue me more than anything. Because it's 300,000 men of Israel and 30,000 men of Judah. And I'm curious about your opinion on this, Isaiah, because that sounds to me like all of Israel brings 300,000 men, and specifically the tribe of Judah brings 30,000 amongst that. Am I understanding that correctly?
I think that's right. To my understanding, that's what it is. That's what I've always read it as.
Yeah.
Because, and specific verse, and when he numbered them in Bezek, the children of Israel were 300,000, and the men of Judah 30,000. They sent to the messengers that came, blah, blah, blah. So it's always been my understanding that saying specifically 30,000 from Judah, because Judah holds a place of prominence with a lot of stories you see in Samuel and Kings, because Judah is the tribe of leadership, effectively, or at least it will be moving forward. Saul is, while he is from the Benjamins, it's typically Judah who's like, the more aristocracy. Yeah. David's of the house of Judah, and specifically Christ is referred to through the Old Testament and by himself in the Gospels as the Lion of Judah.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of emphasis given to Judah now, because they are going to be a primary leader in a lot of the prophecy that plays out in the Bible moving forward. So even though it doesn't matter yet, like right now, Judah doesn't have the detail that it eventually will get as being like the lineage of David and all that. It's interesting how the Bible is giving us context of like, where this is going, I know where this is going, that Judah's going to be a big deal. So just so you know, this is what Judah was doing at this moment, at this moment, at this moment. Yeah, it's some interesting context for the history and where this story's about to go to.
Yeah. And after this, we get this whole series of reminders about Moses and Aaron and the story of the Jews. Because what they've noticed after Saul manages to win this battle, drive off the Ammonites, save Gilead, he's led Israel to its first victory under his reign. This is the opportunity by Samuel to kind of remind everybody, all right, you asked for a king. We gave you a king. You followed the commands of that king, and that king is bound to always consult me as a prophet of the Lord before we do anything. So what are we going to do? And Israel goes, we will no longer be worshiping the Baals and the Asheroths. Like, we're done. Yeah. We're done with the idolatry. We will never do it again. So help me God.
Absolutely. Us, never. We've never gone back on a promise like that.
Yeah, that's kind of the funny part about this, is how many times have they said this at this point?
Yeah. How many specific instances are there of some massive collateral damage because they build a statue to something? Yeah.
It's really like
specifically statues.
You have to go out of your way to build a statue. It's not something you accidentally do.
Yeah, you don't like trip backwards and then all your handfuls of gold go into a furnace and come out as like an ox.
Yeah.
It's not an accidental process.
Last night was crazy, man. What'd you do? I don't know. My back is killing me. Yeah, it's probably because you built a statue last night.
And it was a rager.
You can almost imagine like one of the priests or prophets walking into town and seeing a giant golden calf and being like, "Hey guys, what's this about?" And they're all like, just silly, goofy mood last night. Hit the wine a little too hard. The frankincense was going nuts. Like, I don't really know.
The hazards of the job, you know.
No, to be clear, the reason they kept doing this was because they kept getting into minor inconveniences, seeing the people around them not being involved in minor inconveniences, and thinking, well, maybe their god's better than our god.
Kept getting into minor inconveniences. You make it sound like they got stopped in traffic and became pagan.
Okay. So there was a famine, and they were like, okay, maybe we should try paganism again. But you get my point. Like, we have been getting a lot of comments because in our video about feral people, I mentioned the Donner Party. And I said that people will turn to cannibalism at the slightest inconvenience. And everyone's like, it was 3 months of starvation. That is not the slightest inconvenience. And apparently I have a tendency to downplay things, is what we're learning.
It's like they got a coupon for paganism.
Like, what did I say? I said inconvenience. It was inconvenient, was it not?
Yeah, it was not a good situation to be in. They were not thriving. Like,
it was certainly not a convenience, that's for sure.
No. It was definitely outside of the norm for the standard practices they were doing.
Yeah, no, okay. All right, I get it. I refer to some things as being perhaps a little bit less important than they are at times.
It's okay. It keeps us sane.
But yeah, chapter 12 of 1 Samuel is basically this reminder that you guys really should not, do idolatry anymore. And they're like, I promise, we're all good. We got this. And then if you have a standard King James version, a study Bible, what you'll come across in chapter 13 is the heading, His Sinful Offering. Which really makes it sound like he's about to sacrifice a child, or there's some sort of, sexual immorality going on here. In reality, what happens is that they are once again going to battle, this time against the Philistines, and the Philistines are listed as having 6,000 horsemen and 30,000 chariots. That is most likely a mistranslation, and it was probably 3,000 chariots, because the battlefield that's listed just simply does not have space for 30,000 chariots on it.
Oh, but I'd love to see that.
Yeah, and Samuel is one of those books where we have the vast majority of it, but in some cases the original word is illegible, or we believe there may have been a change at some point. So the thinking is that it was probably 3,000 chariots, especially considering the fact that if you only have 6,000 horsemen, there's no reason to have 30,000 chariots. Yeah. Chariots are usually not the main implement of battle.
It's also a point to mention that with the way a lot of this is written in the original, it might be implying total reinforcements that the battle would have. So just because there's not that many on site in the fight, there may be, up to 30,000 chariots back behind lines ready to support the fight moving forward.
Yeah, also a possibility. And if we're talking, if the numbers given are accurate for the Israelites, where we're talking about 300,000 men for some of these battles, 30,000 chariots for a larger kingdom certainly isn't beyond the scope of possibility. Right, yeah. But it would be a little bit odd. There's also, I don't think it even mentions the number of infantry. It says, and people as the sand which is on the seashore in multitude. So just countless people, just so many people.
They had a dude there counting, and he's like, 1, 2, whatever.
Basically,
enough.
He's looking out over the field. He's like, that's a lot of dudes.
Yeah, man,
I'm gonna make them. This is a metaphor. A metaphor goes here.
Yeah. You know what? I was gonna test out my artistic skills at about this time.
He got to like 2,500, and then a whole nother group came over a hill, and he's like, "That's it. Nope, I'm done.
Nope, I'm done. I quit."
Yeah. One thing that I find really interesting too about chapter 13 is it's mentioned that the Philistines had a bit of a monopoly on iron production and weapons. It basically says that that they're the only people making weapons and armor in the area are the Philistines, and if you are an Israelite who wants to go down who wants to sharpen his even just a farm implement, you have to go down and ask a Philistine to do it. Now, this does imply that the Philistines actually had that the Israelites were living within Philistine territory. Even as they were their own tribes and culture, they were living within Philistine territory because the Philistines had done what the Romans tended to do and said, you don't get any smiths of your own, you don't get any iron workers of your own. You guys come to us for that. We don't want you rebelling against us. So there's this note that not a single sword or spear is found in any of Saul and Jonathan's hands right before this battle with the Philistines. And so they're using farm implements, basically, using axes. This is not, they're not well prepared for battle. And on top of that, Samuel's rule was, hey, you call upon me, you wait 7 days, and then I'll be there and I'll consult with you. So Saul calls for him. Samuel does not appear. And then what we get is Samuel does arrive, but only after Saul has offered up an offering of his own without Samuel's permission. And maybe you can get into the details of why that is a big deal for Samuel.
Yes, so at this time, again, remember, it kind of goes back to the importance of Samuel specifically. So originally, Israel did not have a king. God was their king. Mm-hmm. If they needed a man to act as a mediator for whatever politics were happening on earth, that was when a judge was brought forward. Samuel was the judge. The people demanded a king, so Saul becomes king. Samuel is then moved to the first prophet, or at least the first lineage of prophets for what we know moving through the rest of the Old Testament. So Samuel is like, all right, Saul gets to be, well, this isn't Samuel talking, it's God talking, but Samuel was the messenger of it. Saul gets to be the king, he gets to lead the armies, he gets to do all the wars and the politics and stuff like that. But Samuel is still the mouthpiece of God. He is still the person who brings forward the word of God. He does not act in his own interest. He is effectively God's vessel on earth. What he says goes.
He's a conduit.
So, he's a conduit. So whenever Samuel says something that, again, is not Samuel talking, it's what God has told him through prayer, it's a big deal. So Israel is about to fight this giant army. As we talked about, they are quite large. Regardless of the specific number, it's a lot. Whoever was writing this was clearly worried by the size of or as the sands of the sea. So Samuel goes to Saul and he's like, all right, before the battle, wait 7 days and I am going to come to you. And whenever I come to you, we're going to do a burnt offering. Mm-hmm. Like both of us, as the mouthpiece of God, wait for God to arrive, essentially. Then we will pray, seek God's wisdom in battle and all that. So it says, after 7 days had passed, Samuel came not, and the people were looking for him. So Saul said, fine, I'm going to do the offering myself. So he has the people go around and gather pieces of the offering, and they burn an offering. And as soon as Saul's done, Samuel shows up. Mm-hmm. So Samuel did arrive in 7 days. He did show up at the time that he was supposed to. But Saul, getting nervous, thinking that he knew best, decided that he was just going to do the burnt offering right now, because I know Samuel's supposed to be like, God on earth and all, but I don't trust him. I don't think he understands how time works. I don't think he remembered our appointment. It probably got lost in his schedule somewhere. So you know what? I can do the God thing. I can just... everyone, get a bunch of sticks. We're going to set them on fire, and that'll do it. That's a God thing, right? That's why it's a big deal, because it wasn't that Saul offered up an offering. Typically, that's a good thing. It's that he specifically ignored what Samuel had said to do in order to do it. And Saul knows exactly what he did, because the way the verse is phrased, I also love the way these verses are phrased in the Old Testament. The way it's phrased is that, and it came to pass that as soon as he had made the end of the burnt offering, behold, Samuel came. And Saul went out to meet him that he might salute him. So Saul just broke the rules. He knows right well what he did. He walks out, salutes Samuel, and Samuel said, what hast thou done? And Saul said, well, because I saw that the people were scattered from me, and that thou camest not within the days appointed, and that the Philistines gathered themselves together at Michmash, therefore said I, the Philistines will come down upon me to Gilgal, and I have not made supplication unto the Lord. I forced myself, therefore, and offered a burnt offering. So
Saul's doing everything in his power to be like, I screwed up, but I can work my way out of this.
he's like,
I can reason with God.
No, Mom, don't tell Mom. Don't tell Mom. Mom will be mad. Like, you can hit me. Hit me first. Don't cry. Don't cry. Mom will hear you. He literally walked outside, and he's like, well, you had it show. He gives him 3 problems. He says, well, the people are freaking out, and you didn't show up. And the army's going to be here any minute now. And he said, so I forced myself. He was like, I didn't want to have to do it. You made me do it because you were late and I didn't trust you. So I did it myself. So obviously Samuel's not buying it. It says, and I love the phrasing, I forced myself, therefore. And Samuel said to Saul, thou hast done foolishly. Thou hast not kept the commandment of the Lord thy God. He commanded thee, for now would the Lord have established thy kingdom upon Israel forever. Okay, so what Samuel just said is a big deal, because remember, Saul's the first king. So, and it's heavily implied, with kingships, unless something super tragic happens, after you die, your descendants continue to rule the kingdom, unless something bad happens. And what Samuel just said is, Saul, you were supposed be the kingship of Israel forever. It was supposed to be your lineage, and you are doing a horrible job with the leadership that you've been given right now. Anyway, he goes on and says that because thou hast not what is it? Thou hast sought a man. Oh, okay. I don't know if you want to get in the next part because it refers to David. But
no, we can talk about how it refers to David, because what it says is that basically they got Saul. Saul didn't work out, so they're like, you know what? We're going to find somebody even more humble than you. We're going even further down the line.
We can do worse than a tall guy who's afraid of public speaking. There's worse out there.
we took the highest man from the lowest tribe, and then they just invert it, and it goes lowest man from the highest tribe.
That's true. That's true. They did.
It's a little bit of troubleshooting going on here.
It's like tech support.
Yeah, God's up there like, all right, I know all of the possible outcomes. I'm just gonna pick one.
All right, well, he did a great job. Let's go on to the next guy.
Yeah, tech support over there.
This one didn't work. Let's try the other one, and it'll be somewhere in the middle.
Precisely. I do wonder if David hadn't worked out that quickly, if it would have been like, all right, now we go for the most middle person possible. Like, who's the most average Israelite that exists, and they just find some guy named like Yeshua.
It's like trying to find the right temperature porridge.
You didn't even get the joke.
I did.
He did.
To be fair,
Yeshua is Jesus' Hebrew name.
Oh, okay. Yeah. To be fair, if anybody here is going to get it first, it's going to be him.
Yeah. Yeah, because that is what eventually happens. I mean, we get the whole prophecy as we talk about David. We'll get more into that, but Jesus, part of the rule with him is that the Messiah must be descended from David. So that there's a whole thing here. I mean, getting into the next part of it, because they do win that battle. Like, they do end up succeeding. But then we get to what?
I was going to say, particularly because right after Samuel gives his whole thing, Saul immediately apologizes. Yeah. It's like, I am so sorry, I've done wrong. So God grants him grace. And I do want to mention, while you were talking about, like, what would have happened if, Saul would have been right or David wasn't righteous. I think the story itself is an interesting kind of show for us in the modern age of how God works or how life works effectively, because everyone has questions about, like, all right, well, if God is all powerful, then what is free will? If free will is a gift, how does God know the future?
Right.
What is the future in a linear time? Like, stuff like that. People overcomplicate it and think, okay, well, if God knows what I'm going to do, does that mean I have agency or what have you? And I think this is a perfect example that God both knows what's going to happen, and we also have agency in our own choices.
Yeah.
It's not that God is a puppet master deciding where everything's going to be down the road. It's that he gives us our own decisions and the opportunity to do what we want. Whenever he picks out Saul, he says that Saul is the most righteous man in Israel at the time. He is the guy that's right for the job. And in the beginning, we see his humility and kindness. And there's several chapters before what we get to right now where Saul is a wise and noble king, but he continues to mess up as the power begins to get to his head. And that's not something that's exclusive to him. David and every king after would do the exact same thing. David's sins quite possibly outweigh Saul's, or at least several.
They're pretty bad.
They're pretty bad.
Yeah, David does some screwed up stuff.
He really does. But we see here that God did give the guy who was best for the job, Saul, and Saul, using his own free will, let himself turn to a wicked heart, let himself turn to his own heart. And he essentially lost his position as the man who's right for the job. Rather than let everyone suffer, God had another man picked out. And in that verse, immediately, as actually Samuel is berating him, he says, "But now that kingdom shall not continue. The Lord hath sought him a man after his own heart. And the Lord hath committed that he be captain over his people, because thou hast not kept the Lord commanded thee." That phrase, "the Lord has sought a man after his own heart," is the phrase that's used to describe David over and over again. When Saul talks to him, when his scribes talk to him, they describe him as the king after God's own heart. So here, after Saul messes up, we see that the children of Israel are going to be taken care for, that there is another man. But if Saul had did what he was supposed to and remained righteous, then we never would have heard about David. At least not King David and the shepherd who would grow up to be. But because Saul decided to step out of the will of God, it gave the opportunity for someone else to step into that will of God.
Exactly.
I think it's not that this was all appointed, like from the beginning. God was like, "Oh, I know that Saul is going to fail and be terrible," but because Saul failed, someone else was able to step into that plan. So, That's something I always like to point out in this story, because I think it is directly applicable for a lot of the questions we have today and stuff like that. So yeah.
After this, we get the header, his rash vows.
What?
His rash vows.
Oh yes,
yeah. Whoever was in charge of putting in the headers to the King James version just went so hard. Like I'll always go back to Daniel on this one, where it's like, I'm gonna find it. But if you want to go into what the rash vows are, and why, what happens in this chapter, as I find this
in chapter 14.
Yeah, chapter 14.
Yeah, so this is following the events of the battle before. It says that Saul, at the end of that, after Samuel gives his whole thing, Saul is very, what's the word, guilty over what he did, over not listening to God. Because again, it wasn't that he burned an offering, it's that he burned an offering because he thinks that God isn't going to be there to burn the offering for him in this specific event. So it was effectively a mistrust in what the leadership should be. So Saul is very guilty over it. And after the battle's over, after, as Ada mentioned, they won the battle, it says, to start out the chapter, it says, "Now it came to pass upon that day that Jonathan, the son of Saul, said unto the young man that bare his armor, Come and let us go over to the Philistines' garrison. But he told not his father. And Saul tarried in the uppermost part of Gibeah unto the pomegranate tree, which is in Migron. And the people that were with him were about 600 men. So Saul's gathered by himself. His sons have gone off, the people of the military. And while he's there, he begins to speak to the son of a priest. And if I recall right, this is the chapter where he makes his, like, I mean it this time. I mean it once and for all. I'm going to be a good king, and I'm not going to do the thing I just did, right?
Narrator voice.
Yes. He did not do that.
He, in fact, did the thing. Oh my god. Now I lost my place. Hang on. It's gone. It's where'd it go? Where's Samuel? There it is. We found it. We're back. Oh, almost. There's a lot. The Judges is taking up a lot of my time here. All right, there we go. Yeah. So he's like, I'm really gonna do the right thing this time. As we all know, Saul does not always do the right thing, despite promising to. And once again, the header's really coming in clutch right here. His partial obedience. It's just...
He obeyed, just not completely.
His sinful offering. His rash vows. His partial obedience.
I also wanted to clarify, like, for sake of time, we're going over it. There's an entire chapter of Saul talking about how he's going to be so good. And so great. And this will never happen again, and he'll listen to God all the time. And then the next chapter's header is his partial obedience.
I will be everything you expected me to be, except for I'm only going to do some of it.
Yeah,
It's basically where we get here.
I was going to do part of it will get done. You'll have to guess which ones.
Yeah. Now,
Yeah.
I will say the way in which Saul wages war is aggressive. If you read through here, it's not necessarily incongruous with the times, but there is a lot of genocide in this book. There's a significant amount of genocide in this book.
You violent man.
Now, of course, Saul is only doing what everybody else around him would do in his shoes, but it's not. This is one of those parts of the book that's a little hard to reconcile, because you're like, is Saul being a good guy right now? Are we endorsing this? Are we okay with massive violence?
I was gonna say, like, are you sure it's what anyone else would do in his position?
Any of the other kings of the time, yeah.
Fair.
I mean, look at what here's look at it this way. Nahash, when he comes to Gilead, he says, "If you all serve me, I'll only cut out your right eye." What do you think he's going to do if they don't serve him?
Much worse.
Murder every single one of them.
Yeah.
Take their women as concubines, take their children as slaves, murder all the men. In a way, the way Saul wages war actually is a little bit more merciful, because they don't take anybody as slaves. They just kill everyone. So is it better to be dead or a slave is really the question here.
Well,
That's a question I don't know if I want to answer.
It's also, there's a study, it's a bit bigger than the scope of what we're talking about right now, but there is an interesting study to be had in how a lot of these kings waged war, because Saul isn't the only one to do it. He's the first one to do it, but he's not the only one to do it to this degree of kind of like these campaigns of conquest. And like you said, the note of like Saul being merciful compared to the other rulers and kings at the time is true. We've seen time and time before that God has explicitly been like, look, when you go to war with someone, it is because they are actively standing in your way, because they are trying to destroy you. They're trying to kill you. And now when the people want a king, one of the first things they do is they go on these war paths like all the other nations. And it's like a corruption of the people of God going out to tear up other nations and attack just like everyone else does. It's an interesting kind of downfall of the place they're supposed to be, place of power, which also goes back to Samuel's speech whenever they first asked for a king, and he was like, if you want chariots and war paths, this is what you're going to get. And the people still wanted it, so here they are.
They almost these are people who go from being downtrodden and kind of slaves and servants to everybody they meet, and they get a little taste of power, and suddenly they go off on some, at first it's about, okay, we'll go into the land of Canaan and take their things from them. They belong to you now. I have given them to you. It's, drive the Philistines from your lands so that you'll be safe. But they don't stop there. So the rules they're given are basically, these people have oppressed you. You have every right to go after them now. The Israelites go past that and at Saul's behest. It's not them just kind of doing this because they feel like they're supposed to. At a certain point, it goes beyond that, and they're even told not to take the spoils. They're told not to take the treasures. They're told not, and all sorts of things. One of the things that they do here is, in the previous chapter, I believe it is, they get in trouble because they don't drain the animals that they take of blood before eating them, which is unkosher and it's against Jewish law. So they're punished for that. And then they go on. Oddly enough, it's Saul who keeps doling out the punishments, despite the fact that Saul himself also is not doing what he's supposed to do. So whereas he might be the best of the Israelites at the time, the most honorable, the most righteous, it doesn't necessarily mean he's a good person. Is kind of the interesting thing here. And it's a very difficult theological subject to broach, but just because somebody's the best you have does not necessarily mean they're a good person.
Sounds like they go from righteous to unjustifiably rebellious, in a sense.
It's not even rebellious at this point. It becomes conquest. But we do. It's good you mentioned the word rebellion, because in 1523 it's for rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft, and stubbornness is as iniquity and idolatry. Because thou hast rejected the word of the Lord, he hath also rejected thee from being king. Now, of course, this is in reference to Saul and Saul's rebellion against the Lord. So rebellion can be justified. Rebellion against the Lord in this case is never justified.
Yeah.
It's never acceptable to go against God. But if you're being, for example, the Jews will eventually be oppressed by the Babylonians and by the Persians and by the Greeks and by the Romans and by you
Just
get my point.
everyone.
They will go on to consistently be oppressed by everybody. There are some rebellions that are good in these cases. For example, the Maccabean Revolt. That's a good one. That's a rebellion against not only Antiochus IV, but also a group of the Jewish priestly class who have sided with the Greeks and started to basically say, no, we should be okay with the Greeks, even though they're trying to get rid of our religion and our culture and all of that. They're pretty cool. And so that rebellion, if you look at who's rebelling against God in that situation, it's the priests. It's not the Jews. So that's one of those circumstances where it comes in and it kind of goes full circle, and suddenly the people have to throw off their own leaders because they're going against God. It's
a good reminder that intent of the actions is important in the sense of, when you start out as a righteous rebellion against those who are oppressing you, that's one thing. But when you kind of, like you said, shift into more of a conquest mentality and you don't listen to the holy word or just even the morality of the situation, then you're clearly crossing a line that is the only word that comes to mind is despicable.
Also, I don't know what it is with biblical prophets and just dropping absolute bars every time they talk to somebody. But basically as Samuel is reprimanding Saul for how he's only been partially obedient to everything, he says, it goes, let me see. And as Samuel turned about to go away, he laid hold upon the skirt of his mantle, and it rent. And Samuel said unto him, the Lord hath rent the kingdom of Israel from thee this day, and hath given it to a neighbor of thine that is better than thou.
Yes. So that can I talk about the events that happened in chapter 15?
That's what I was hoping to do, is give people the punishment so that we could then. I wanted to build the suspense here.
All right. Sorry. I
was about to toss it to you.
I was like, we have to talk about the goat bleeding. It's so good. Okay. All right. This is one of my favorite, most memorable little segments of the Bible. So this is, again, shortly after Saul did his whole, I'm going to be a very, very good boy forever, okay? Also, it should be mentioned in that chapter 14 that we kind of rolled over wherever he's asking forgiveness, it said that because he has repented and truly, in his heart of hearts, asked God to forgive him, that the kingdom's restored to him, okay? So he messed up. And Samuel's like, look, there's another guy who's going to take your place, which we know is David, because it says, man after God's own heart. He's like, there's another guy who's going to take your place. God's not going to let this kingdom fall in spite of you. So you can either get with the program or get out. So Saul asked for forgiveness, and at the end of it, Samuel's like, all right, kingdom's yours again. All is forgiven out of mercy. And then Saul immediately messes up. So this is after he's forgiven. It says they go to fight. It was in chapter 15. They go to fight the Amalekites. Yep. So whenever they go to fight the Amalekites, this is also, again, people never understand the historical context for it. Amalekites, very bad, no good people. Yeah. These are a group of people who do child sacrifice. They not only worship false idols, but they are slave traders and murderers. Yep. They're despicable in every sense, and at a time when spirituality is very physical, angels and demons physically roam the earth, everything these people have is infested with them. It is unholy, it is unclean, you're not to touch it. So, whenever they go to fight the Amalekites, it says, thus saith the Lord of hosts. I remember that which Amalek did to Israel whenever the Amalekites originally attacked. Now go and smite Amalek and utterly destroy all that they have. Spare them not, but slay both man, woman, infant, suckling, ox, sheep, camel, ass. He says, when you go into that place, nothing comes out. All right, you're destroy it. The Amalekites do not exist. They're effectively the spawn of the devil. So,
and he even Saul goes to the other people who are living among the Amalekites and even tells them, like, hey, you're not our target, but we have orders to kill everybody who's in this city. So if you don't leave, you're going to die. And they do leave.
Yes, most of them ditch except... Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say really quickly, just to be clear about this, there are two groups that Saul is fighting at this point. He's fighting the Philistines, who we don't totally understand what they are to this day. There's a lot of people who have ideas. One of the suggestions is that they are Greek colonists who are fleeing the fall of Mycenaean Greece. There's one of the leading theories at the moment is that the Philistines were originally a group of Mycenaean Greeks or Minoans who went over to the Near East, to the Levant, settled there, and then began to intermingle with the native Canaanite population. The Israelites, of course, are Canaanites, as to an extent. They're a mix of Babylonian and Canaanite. And then the Philistines come in. They seem to be a mix of Greek and Canaanite. And then the other group the Israelites are fighting at this point is the Canaanites. That's who the Amalekites are and all of that. They're all groups of Canaanites.
There's also, in my weird conspiracy theory, reason to believe that the Amalekites were part of the dark race or the race of giants or Nephilim that are a part of it. Just want to throw that in there. Anyway, Amalekites.
All right, I'm interested why you say that.
The mentions in the Old Testament of not the Nephilim. They're called like the seed of man or something like that. But are you
talking about the Rephaim?
No. Maybe they're called the Rephaim at some point, but specifically it's mentioned in either, I think it's Leviticus, maybe Chronicles, I think it's Leviticus, so it mentions that they have dispersed themselves among the heathen people of other lands. So more conspiracy theories for me that these people are really the spawn of the devil. And
we should talk about that one, because now I'm curious.
Anyway, so the Amalekites, no good, bad people. So it says that, okay, Saul's command, get in there, no survivor. So what does Saul do? It says he smote the Amalekites from Havilah unto the Shur that is over against Egypt. So they're wiping them out everywhere. And he took Agag, the king of the Amalekites, alive and utterly destroyed all the people with the edge of the sword. But Saul and the people spared Agag and the best of the sheep and of the oxen and of the fatlings and the lambs and all that was good, and would not utterly destroy them, but everything that was vile and refuse, that they destroyed utterly. So they got in there and they started killing, and they're like, but these are some cool sheep. These are some really cool camels. Hate to kill those, even though, again, the commandment was these guys are horrific. They need to be wiped out. Saul's like, but what if we turn this from a war of protection into a war of conquest? What if now we're like, what if we get some loot out of this? What if we get something that we can bring back home? So, with that, whenever he decides to not, again, do what God said and decides to keep some of this stuff for himself, it says, then came the word of the Lord unto Samuel. So at the same time this is happening, God starts talking to Samuel. And it says, this is God talking, it repenteth me that I have set up Saul to be king. For he is turned back from following me, and hath not performed my commandments. And it grieved Samuel, and he cried unto the Lord all night. So you gotta think about this. Samuel was the man of God. He is the one who directly hears the ear of the people and the ear of God in himself. People said they want a king. He talked to God. God gave them the king. Samuel is supposed to be the mediator and all. Supposed to be the man. And as soon as this event happens, that Samuel's not even there for, God speaks to Samuel and says, it grieves me that I chose Saul to be king, because he's continuously messed up his chance. God gave Saul a real chance, but Saul
actually gave Saul several chances.
Gave Saul multiple chances. And Saul continues to misuse those. And now Samuel, as the mediator, sees that the man that he is supposed to prop up to be the man of God keeps falling. And it says Samuel cried unto the Lord all night.
Yeah.
So anyway,
I love that next little bit too, where and Samuel came to Saul and said unto him, "Blessed be thou of the Lord, I have performed the commandment of the Lord." And Samuel literally goes, "Then why do I hear goats bleating?"
Yes. That it is one of, this is up there with pity for the gourd.
Yep.
It's so good because the way it's worded is Samuel walks up comes to Saul, and Saul yells, "Blessed be thou of the Lord, I have performed the commandment of the Lord," which was again to kill everything.
Mm-hmm.
And Samuel came to Saul, and Samuel said, "What meaneth then this bleating of the sheep in mine ears, and the lowing of the oxen which I
It's
hear?"
so sarcastic. I love it.
Samuel literally walks up. He's like, "Oh, you killed everything. Okay, so why do I hear sheep? Where are they coming from?"
This entire event feels like it could be in a sitcom. Like you can almost feel it. Like Saul walks into the room and there's the like cheering and clap, or Samuel walks in and there's cheering and clapping, and Saul's like, hey, I did it. I did what God said. And then Samuel's like, then what's this sheep bleating I hear? And the laugh track goes, like.
I hate that my instinct is pinning these people as characters in Seinfeld.
That's appropriate, actually.
That's a good point.
He was a Jewish comedian.
Yep.
So that tracks.
Somebody make that edit where Jerry is Saul.
Somebody use a deep fake to have Jerry Seinfeld be Saul here.
Yes.
No. Jerry's got to be Samuel here.
Yeah. And then George is Saul.
Actually, oh my gosh, could you imagine a deep faked episode of Seinfeld, but it's like Saulfeld?
I did it, Jerry. I did it. Then why do I hear the sheep?
Yeah,
why do I hear?
Samuelfeld.
Oh, good Lord. Somebody
it.
do that. I'm not going to do it, but somebody do it. We've broken Isaiah. I mean, to be fair, I'm fascinated that we made it this far without that happening yet.
I'm proud of you guys. It took a whole hour.
I performed the commandment of the Lord, Jerry. Then what's with all these sheep?
I performed the commandment of the Lord.
It's the meme. What's going on in there? I'm performing the commandments of the Lord, Jerry.
What's going on in there? It's the commandment of God, Jerry.
And then Kramer,
sheep crowded up on the wall.
Kramer flies in and he's David.
Oh boy.
Oh, is this blasphemy?
Probably. It's your fault.
I'm usually the blasphemous one here, so it's fine. I'll take the blame.
I feel like connecting the Bible to pop culture works. It's pop culture from 25 years ago, but it's pop culture.
Yeah.
Are you a non-denominational church now?
Hang on, let me grab a stool and whip it around backwards and sit on it like this so I can be one of the kids.
Yeah.
How do you do, fellow Christians?
You gotta have your skinny jeans.
Yeah, well, I mean, we got that part nailed down.
Yeah, fair. You're already halfway there.
Tucked in plaid shirt.
There we go. And the Vans.
And then you just sit down and you're like, man, I've got such a hot wife. And that's how.
All right, kids, let's gab.
Yeah.
Christianity goes punk in person.
Oh God. Do you mean Skillet? Do you mean Reliant K? Do I need to whip out the playlist? Because I have the playlist.
Oh, I know.
I have an unforeseen Christianity playlist on Spotify.
Oh yeah, you've told me about that. That's right. I remember that. Yes.
Oh, I should probably share that on the link tree or something.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It is a real thing and not something you lied about just now.
That is a true thing that exists. He has heard it.
Oh yeah, many times.
Yeah, but anyway, so he Saul apologizes for all this, and Samuel goes, "Bring ye hither to me Agag, the king of the Amalekites." And Agag came unto him delicately. And Agag said, "Surely the bitterness of death is past." And Samuel said, "As thy sword hath made women childless, so shall thy mother be childless among women." And Samuel hewed Agag in pieces before the Lord in Gilgal. So Saul can't get the job done. So he's like, "Bring Agag to me," and Saul just murks the guy. And again, drops an absolute bar. As thy sword hath made women childless, so shall thy mother be childless among women. Boom.
That might be one of the hardest lines I've ever heard.
Yeah, it's metal.
Literally.
Yep. And I do love Agag being like, okay, so I'm good. I'm here with the prophet. I'm here with the king. All's okay. And then no.
Yep. Then just reality check.
Yeah, I love that part. But this whole episode, and Samuel kind of tells Saul to an extent, like, you know, it's he doesn't say that he's turning away from Saul necessarily, but we get Saul says, then he said, I have sinned, yet honor me now, I pray thee, before the elders of my people and before Israel, and turn again with me that I may worship the Lord. So Samuel turned again after Saul, and Saul worshiped the Lord. So we kind of have this moment where Saul has apologized. Samuel goes back to working with him to an extent, says, you know, like, all right, well, I'm not going to punish you right now. But then Saul and Samuel never actually helps Saul again. He comes no more to see Saul. He doesn't advise Saul. He has given up on Saul. And that's when we start to see David come into the story.
It's an interesting point too, because like there's a it's a saying my dad used to have with me. I know there's a verse for it somewhere that he'd pull it from, but there's rules for you, rules for thee, not rules for them. I believe I think it's Moses who said it to Joshua at one point. He was talking about the people rebelling, and he effectively said, like, they can do that. They have the opportunity to do that, but you are in a higher place of power. You don't get to make these mistakes because it means more. You get the blessings, but you also have the responsibility.
When you think about what a king is, they're a leader. They're supposed to be an example to their people.
It's a lot bigger of a deal if a king messes up and does something wrong in an army than if a foot soldier does it, right? It's completely different. And what's interesting, and I need to, because this is like you're talking about Samuel dropping bars. Whenever this initially happens after the bleeding of the sheep in my ear thing, the first thing he says to him, because Saul's standing there, he knows he's done wrong again, and he's probably mournful. And Samuel looks at him and says, when thou was little in thine own sight, wast thou not made the head of the tribes of Israel? And the Lord anointed thee king over Israel. And the Lord sent thee on a journey and said, go and destroy the sinners of the Amalekites and fight against them until they be consumed. Wherefore then didst thou not obey the voice of the Lord, but did fly upon the spoil, and didst evil in the sight of the Lord? And then Saul asked for forgiveness. He says, no, it's not me. I was going to kill them, but then the people wanted to keep the sheep. And I'm supposed to be king over my people. How am I to kill these sheep that they need, that they want? And Samuel responds by saying, hath the Lord a delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices, as in obeying the voice of the Lord? Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to hearken than the fat of rams. That's what Thaddeus was talking about. For rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft, and stubbornness is iniquity and idolatry. Thou hast rejected the word of the Lord, he hath rejected thee from being king. So it's like he's made this great mistake, and Samuel tells him exactly why it's a big mistake. Because in that whole response Saul gives, he says, think about it. We can kill these sheep and we'll use them as offerings. We'll use them as offerings for God. See, I was thinking about God the whole time. I had a purpose in that. That's not what it was.
No.
But the same thing, even if that is what it was, what he says is burnt offerings and sacrifice as good as obedience. He says you're disobeying, you know exactly what you've done, and now you've made two big mistakes now. People have suffered for it, and people are going to suffer for it. You've now been rejected for being king. And the start of the next chapter is God telling Samuel to go find David. So it's like he had his first mistake. He was kicked out. He asked for forgiveness, and God gave him a second chance, and he did the same thing over. And Samuel delicately and directly explains what he did wrong. He rights the wrong, like you said, by smiting the king. And then after that, it's like, okay, the people deserve better, so let's go find them better. And God sends Samuel to go get David. And then we have the entire legacy of the shepherd king David. And it's so good, but yeah.
Oh, yeah. And of course, I mean, David's aside from his flaws, a really cool character. I mean, the guy's got more bravery than just about anybody you're going to come across. A musician, a poet, and all of that. Unfortunately, he also has a bit of a lust issue that we'll get into.
Forgot about the coveting bit in the
that he took
crazy. It's almost like even the most mighty and righteous men of history can be torn down by the affections of women in love after their own heart. It's wild that all these men are just men who fail and do stuff. Anyway, I'm sure there's a message.
Is that why you killed those 3 to 5 children? Did Kayla tell you to?
Brilliant.
That's a good bet. I need to remember that one's in the back pocket for whenever you say anything.
We pull that one up on the stream on Twitch every now and then.
Oh, good lord.
To laugh.
I'm glad you've got mileage out of that.
Just to keep it fresh in people's minds.
Exactly. I'm playing. They came up last night. We were playing the new Sons of the Forest game, and there's one of the things you can fight in that game is evil mutant babies that fling themselves at you. And I was whacking them left and right. I was dropping those little guys. And somebody goes like, "This is like that one Wendigoon clip." Like exactly, precisely.
About
you
killing
get it.
Children.
Yeah, what I said was actually worse. I'll tell you later.
Okay, perfect.
That was rough.
It's okay for Twitch, not for YouTube.
Yeah, no, it's actually not okay for YouTube. Especially on a Bible show. Yeah, so I do like how the immediate reaction of the people of David's tribe is, are you here in peace? When Samuel walks in, they're like, you're here for a good reason, right? And Samuel goes, yeah, don't worry about it. Everybody, we're going to anoint each other. We're going to do a sacrifice together. And, it's all going to be good. There's nothing to worry about. Now, of course, Samuel himself is quaking in his boots because he's convinced that the second Saul hears about this, he's like, Samuel's getting got. And God's like, no, you're good. Just go do it. Just go do the thing. I've got this whole thing planned out. We're fine. And so he goes in and he finds, again, sometimes the names in the Bible make me laugh a little bit because you've got names like Belshazzar and Samuel and Abraham. The guy in charge here who Samuel's talking to is named Jesse.
Really?
Yeah.
Love that.
So, yeah, Jesse, I believe, is the patriarch at this time of Judah, right?
Yes, of the tribe of Judah, yeah.
Yeah, and they go in. Samuel goes in, and he says, "Are here all thy children?" And Jesse says, "There remaineth yet the youngest, and behold, he keepeth the sheep." And Samuel said unto Jesse, "Send and fetch him, for we will not sit down till he come hither." This is again reinforcing the idea that David's almost an afterthought for his own dad. Is like, okay. So,
well, it's like, you bring all the men of your house forward to come meet the prophet of Israel, like the main guy. It's like, oh, we'll bring all of our eldest sons, our men, our warriors, or all that. And then, because Samuel's been told to go there, the chapter opens up with saying that God tells Samuel, how long are you going to mourn for Saul? We need to find a new king for these people. So he tells him to go to the house of Jesse. So Samuel goes there with the thought of like, I am going to find the king. And when he gets there, he sees all of the noblemen of family. And Samuel's like, nah, this isn't right. Do you have any more sons? And the father's like, well, my youngest son, he's a shepherd out in the field. Like he's 13 or something. There's no way the prophet of Israel wants to hear what that guy has to say. He's just a kid.
Yeah.
So as Aiden said, Samuel tells him to go get him.
Yeah, so he does. And one thing that I find interesting about this little bit is where Jesse is from. Because Jesse is a Bethlehemite. Which means he's from Bethlehem, which means David was born in Bethlehem. As you can see, all of the many twines come together with David, and it gives you a good understanding of why Jesus later on in the Bible is able to go in and kind of recite these prophecies and point out all the similarities, and his apostles are able to say, oh, well, David was born in Bethlehem and Jesus was born in Bethlehem, and David's of Judah and Jesus is of Judah, so on and so forth. And I also, if you, and he sent and brought him in. Now he was ruddy and with all of a beautiful countenance and goodly to look to. So goodly, of course, being a Middle English, not quite middle, early modern English term for handsome. David's good looking. He's cool. We're all good, but he is small. He's a little guy. And he brings him in, of course, in front of all of Jesse's more noble sons, and who have all just been passed over by Samuel. And the Lord says to Samuel, who himself is a little surprised here, "Arise, anoint him, for this is he." And Samuel doesn't question it. Then Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the midst of his brethren, and the Spirit of the Lord came upon David from that day forward. Spirit of the Lord and Holy Spirit, Isaiah.
Yeah, so the Holy Spirit is something that is specifically mentioned in the New Testament. It is not so now as Christians. It says that whenever we are saved, whenever we're in the
Mhm.
blood of Christ, that the Holy Spirit dwells within us.
Mhm.
Sort of the peace of God that is a part of us. The Spirit is everywhere and and every time, all at once. Um, whereas in the Old Testament, that had not yet happened yet. The reason that was able to happen was of Christ's death on the cross. At the time, these men did not have the Holy Spirit. They followed the law, they followed the covenant, they followed God directly. So, in times like this, whenever we see specific instances of men either gaining power or gaining wisdom or something have you, it says the Spirit of the
Mhm.
Lord comes into them. I do think that's different from the Holy Spirit, um, at least enough so to differentiate the name, in the sense that this isn't just the blanket, salvation or, grace of God being put on them or whatever. Anytime a man in the Bible is referred to as having the Spirit of the Lord, they are endued with some form of wisdom or of betterment or clarity, maybe a way to hear and speak to God directly. We only see it with times like coronations, prophets, big events like that. I do think, while maybe similar in, I guess you could say, mechanics, how the Holy Spirit kind of comes down upon
Mhm.
humanity now. Um, Perhaps similar in that sense, but otherwise, I do think that this is something more specific to denote that this is God saying, "You're my guy, and we're going to get through this together effectively."
Yeah, I like that assessment. It's better than I could have worded it. Yeah, and somebody I just caught this one in chat. Somebody said in Strong's Concordance, actually David was weak looking. Weak looking, as in he was small. He was a little frail. He wasn't what you'd expect, especially after seeing Saul, who's this tall, muscular, good-looking soldier.
Yeah,
David he's a young guy. He's small. He's not even really. They don't even give him a sword and a spear. Like he's a little dude, and so he's not. It's not that he's ugly. It's just that he doesn't look strong. Looking at him,
yeah, yeah.
um, and this is
It,
of
it
course,
says
yeah.
specifically in verse 7, off of that, it says, "The Lord said unto Samuel, Look not on his countenance or on the height of his stature. I have refused him. For the Lord seeth not as man seeth. Man looketh on the outward appearance, but the Lord looketh on the heart."
Yeah.
So he tells Samuel before he even gets there, he's like, "Don't think about how tall he is, his stature. We're talking about matters of the spiritual and supernatural right now. Being under 5 feet does not matter. That does not apply here."
Mhm.
Um, like the last guy was the physically imposing figure that the people thought a king should look like. This one is how a king should behave, how a
Mhm.
king should act like.
Yeah, he
Um,
had just chosen the guy who looked like a king. Now he's going to choose the guy
yeah,
who acts
that
like
went
a king.
great.
Yeah,
Yes, yeah,
and we're
that went
finally
great
getting
for
to
him.
the part of this podcast that I think everybody's been waiting for, and then we'll go to questions. Uh, because there's one short part first, but then we're getting to the little bit that I think everybody wants to know the thoughts on, which is David and Goliath. But David immediately he goes and he's employed at Saul's court. He becomes a servant of Saul rather than immediately replacing him. There's a period during which he's beneath Saul. He's serving Saul because Saul is not yet aware that he's no longer king of Israel. He's that the other king has been anointed, that he's there, that he exists. As far as Saul is concerned, he's still king. And the spirit of the Lord departs from Saul and goes to David, but it says that an evil spirit is sent from the Lord to Saul. So I'm curious what you think about that. The Old Testament, the term evil is used a lot. I don't love the translation there personally, because I went back and I looked at it. The Hebrew word, I believe the word used here is ra, uh, doesn't mean evil. And I might be wrong. This might be a different translation, but my understanding of this is that the term used here is actually more akin to dysfunctional, a dysfunctional spirit. Now, it could also be an evil spirit, but evil spirit is a term that typically refers to demons. So do you think that Saul got a demon? Or that he just kind of
So
was like
that
befuddled?
this goes back to something I was going to mention earlier, but I decided to wait till now to bring it up. So thank you.
Of course.
There is a theory proposed by a lot of scholars I've read, which I don't know how much I would directly say this is like,
Mm-hmm.
yes, this is truth, but it is something interesting to think about.
Mm-hmm.
The idea that Saul had some kind of mental disorder.
Mm-hmm.
Um, some kind of hysteria, some kind of mania. Because there are several instances, you kind of mentioned it earlier, whenever you were like, yeah, Saul is doing, like, he's being bad. He's going against God, but he's also deciding judgment for people who are bad against God. And it's something that we see out of Saul a lot. He will do a horrific act and then super overcompensate
Mhm.
by doing something that didn't really matter in the first place, and then he'll just swing back and forth.
Mhm.
Some people have speculated maybe as bipolar disorder.
Gotcha.
Some people have thought maybe it's a manic sense, but
Yeah, borderline
obviously
personality
we don't
disorder or
know for
something like
sure.
that.
Yeah, some kind of BPD or something like that. There's instances later where he will take a spear and throw it at David to kill him, and then immediately afterwards crawl on his hands to knees, crying to David,
Mhm.
asking him to come back.
Yeah,
And then
it seems
he'll
like he
let
has poor
David
impulse
sit in the
control.
king's chair. Yes, yeah, he'll flip from trying to kill someone to asking them if they want to be king. There's near the end of Saul's reign, there are multiple times where he commits massacres on his own people.
Mhm.
That if he thinks someone has talked to David, there's one time that a priest just lets David through a door.
Mhm.
He has the priest, all of his apprentices, which is like 60 people, and the priest and all the apprentices' family slaughtered
Mhm.
because they talked to David.
Yeah.
The next day, he tears off his shirt and bows down, offering it to David, asking him to be king in Saul's place. Like complete levels of, like you said,
Mhm.
poor impulse control.
Yeah, it
Which
really
eventually
it does make sense if you look at it that that's how it would be written about. That, you know, the spirit of the Lord departed and
wording,
suddenly Saul just goes crazy.
and the wording there, I think, is also interesting. It doesn't specifically say that the Lord sent an evil spirit to Saul. It says the spirit of the Lord
Mhm.
departed from Saul, and an evil spirit from the Lord troubled him. It's not saying that as soon as as soon as David was picked to be king, that God just like pointed his finger at Saul and then sent like a demon to possess him or whatever. The way it's phrased is that because he's no longer you talked about that Holy Spirit, Spirit of the Lord. The Spirit of the Lord is now on David. He's the guy with the divine countenance and ability to rule. So the Spirit of the Lord leaves Saul, which means now Saul is open to a new spirit, an evil spirit. So in what my opinion's always been is that Saul has had these personal troubles and these downturns, potentially a mental illness, potentially some kind of hysteria, who knows. But Saul has had these mental troubles in his mind. And whenever he was made king, the Spirit of the Lord came upon them, and he was able to be better than them. Like he still had his sins and his temptations, which he acted on, but he was able to turn himself from them and try to be better. But now that he doesn't get that bonus, now that he doesn't get the protection of the Lord, he's left to his own devices. And we see him become much more belligerent
Mhm.
and malicious after this.
Yeah.
I think it's just that, like you said, that's how it would be worded, someone with an instability of the mind. I
Yeah.
think because he doesn't get that special protection as king anymore, that he is now left to perhaps his own mental illness or something similar.
And I mean, you kind of think about it. What assume that you've had the spirit of God on your shoulder advising you for years now, and then suddenly it leaves. That
Yep.
you know that's like your
Yep.
that's gotta do a number on your mental state.
Yep.
So, you know, where we get here is, and Saul said unto his servants, provide me now a man that can play well and bring him to me, because they want. Sorry. Let our Lord now command thy servants, which are before thee, to seek out a man who is a cunning player on a harp. And it shall come to pass, when the evil spirit from God is upon thee, that he shall play with his hand, and thou shalt be well. So basically, they're saying, go get somebody who plays nice, soothing music and bring it to Saul when he's in one of his moods. And that's how David ends up in the service of Saul, is because he plays the harp well. And, you know, of course, if you've heard the extraordinarily popular, it's Leonard Cohen, right? That originally wrote Hallelujah?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's him.
The insanely popular Leonard Cohen song that's been covered by everyone under the sun. You know, I heard there was a secret chord that David played and it pleased the Lord. That's not just like because it rhymes nicely. That's actually a reference to David's ability to play the harp, which is one of the best known characteristics he has. A lot of depictions of David show him with his harp, and it's that harp that gets him brought into Saul's service in the first place. So there's a lot of, you know, a lot of poetic storytelling in this book.
There's a painting of him on I don't know who did it. It's an old Renaissance painting of David on the roof of the temple, looking down at Bathsheba as he's playing the harp, and it's one of the most heartbreaking paintings I've ever seen. Like him still connected to that the part that made God happy, that made the king happy, while lust draws his eyes. It's the story of David is phenomenal. Just like even taking the God out of it, it's such a beautiful tale.
Real quick before you hop to the next part, just in relation to your comment about saying how it must have been really damaging for God to essentially leave you after being so like prominent in your life. Spooky Trooper said, God is one hell of a drug.
Oh, good Lord. You can't refer to God as a drug.
No comment.
I like tossing the borderline, if not definitively
Good Lord.
blasphemous comments.
So that at least they come down on you instead of us.
Exactly. But I get your genuine reactions because they're usually pretty solid.
Yeah. Okay, so then answered one of the servants and said, Behold, I have seen a son of Jesse the Bethlehemite that is cunning in playing, and a mighty valiant man, and a man of war, and prudent in matters, and a comely person, and the Lord is with him. I'm not sure where they came to the understanding at this point that David was good at war, but do you know where that comes from? Because I certainly don't.
He's got a harp. He can do the war.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's the same thing.
Remind me how old he is at this point again?
Get that boy gun.
Does it say particularly how old David is when he's anointed? Anywhere?
He's 14. He can shoot a rifle. I don't
The
know
ATF at Ruby Ridge be like,
that child's a combatant. Get him. Quick, that harp is gun shaped. Shoot him
Exactly.
quick. I don't think it's mentioned here. If I recall right, it's mentioned later in the Bible. He was anointed at 14.
I believe he was that young. Yeah.
So pretty young to be king over a nation.
Yeah, but at the same time, you look at there's a reason he's put into battle with a sling. Huh?
Right. He also it's also important to note he's not king yet. He is anointed. He's also anointed in secret.
Yeah. Anointed doesn't mean coronated.
Jesse.
Yeah.
Yes, that means that you are set to be the next in line for king, which means there's a period of time where David is playing the harp in the temple for the king, which is Saul sitting on the chair, and the anointment was done in secret because Samuel feared what Saul would do to David if he knew he anointed another king. So David is a child sitting there playing the harp for the king, knowing that he himself is supposed to be the next king. Yeah, which is, again, great story. It's so good.
It tells you exactly how patient David was too. But yeah, so Saul sends for David. Jesse sends an ass laden with bread and a bottle of wine and a kid, and sent them by David his son unto Saul. So not only is Jesse's kind of like buttering Saul up, knowing what's going on here to an extent. So
somewhat, I don't mean to keep cutting you off. One of the comments, I'm going to be thinking about this, talking about what you said about one day the voice of God just leaves Saul. Mm-hmm. They said just the deafening silence of the Lord's absence.
Ooh, yeah, wow.
That's horrifying.
That's deep.
All right. All right,
that hurts.
Continue.
Ugh. Yeah. Well, I mean, if you think about what it does to Saul to be separated from God on Earth, you can only imagine what hell is like. That's why I don't think hell necessarily needs to be a fiery plane of existence. It's just removal from God.
Get me riled up.
As we talked about in like the second episode of the show.
Yeah.
Do you care to take it for a second while I run to the bathroom?
Yeah, sure. I was just about to get into David.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
All right,
so,
cool.
And it came to pass. This is okay. So I'll just read the part out from when David arrives. And David came to Saul and stood before him, and he loved him greatly, and he became his armor bearer. So David is not just a harpist; he is actually also what you might recognize as a squire.
I was gonna say, it sounds a lot like a squire.
And Saul said to Jesse, saying, "Let David, I pray thee, stand before me, for he hath found favor in my sight." So Saul, not knowing what David's going to do, immediately becomes, likes David, and he's like, "Okay, I approve of this guy." And it came to pass when the evil spirit from God was upon Saul that David took an harp and played with his hand. So Saul was refreshed and was well, and the evil spirit departed from him. So David's harp playing calmed Saul when he was in one of his fits.
Yeah,
is what we're getting here, which really does. I like what Isaiah was saying about the idea that this was a mental illness that came upon him after the spirit of God left him. Because if you think about that, music is known to be capable of soothing people who are going through episodes of mania, psychosis, and lots of different mental disorders.
Music therapy is its own practice.
So the idea, and this is why I really do love reading the Bible, because you get these really, really old descriptions of things that you look at what modern science is up to, and you're like, that's kind of right there with what we do now. So you can tell that, you know, some of this stuff that was going on, there's like an actual realistic basis for it.
Yep.
It's not that David's harp playing was even all that particularly magical, but it seems like magic at the time, because they don't know how neural pathways work. They don't know how this affects you. So when David plays the harp and it calms the king, you get, oh, okay, that's special.
Yep.
So then we get to the part you've all been waiting for. The rise of David over Saul and David's defeat of Goliath. This is chapter 17. Now the Philistines gathered together their armies to battle, and were gathered together at Shochoh, which belongeth to Judah. So they gather at a territory that is within the tribe of Judah's territory. And pitched between Shochoh and Azekah in Ephistanim. And Saul and the men of Israel were gathered together, and pitched by the valley of Elah, and set the battle in array against the Philistines. And the Philistines stood on a mountain on the one side, and Israel stood on a mountain on the other side, and there was a valley between them. And there went out a champion out of the camp of the Philistines, named Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. Can you look that up for me? I believe he's supposed to be 9 feet tall, but I might be wrong. Yeah,
9 feet 9 inches.
Damn, my memory is good.
That was impressive. Also, can we just take a moment to really let that sink in, how tall that is?
Yeah, Goliath is a tall guy.
That's putting it mildly.
He is a very large man, and a lot of people have suggested over the years that Goliath was one of the Nephilim, that this is why he's so tall, why he's so strong. It's more likely he just was suffering from gigantism, or that Goliath was a member of this race known as the Rephaim, or a descendant of it. We get encounters with these guys like 200 years earlier in Numbers. That he may have just been unusually large, or he may have had a growth disorder, or he could have been a descendant of a race of particularly large people, and that recessive trait carried on through him.
I know it's unlikely given the fact that it is such a specifically notated height, but is it possible with a little bit of a game of telephone that it was a bit, it was more used to represent the metaphorical size of Goliath versus David rather than the actual size?
Well, let me read you the rest of the description here. And he had a helmet made of brass upon his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail. That's not right. I'll explain that.
Okay.
It's not necessarily a mistranslation, but it's a time-sensitive translation.
Yep.
And the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of brass, and he had greaves of brass upon his legs, and a target of brass between his shoulders. And the staff of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his spear's head weighed 600 shekels of iron, and one bearing a shield went before him.
So the level of detail really suggests that it was written specifically.
Somebody recorded this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So somebody, like, potentially even, like, in order to get those measurements, you're not just looking at him, you're taking his armor back and weighing it.
Yeah.
Like, you know exactly what's going on here. I'll wait for Isaiah to get back to get the specific discussion about the Giants, because it's Isaiah.
Yep. Somebody clip that one.
But one thing here that is important to note in determining who specifically the Philistines were, this whole champion thing is one of the reasons people think it's the Greeks. Because if you read the Iliad, this is what the Greeks do. The Greeks and also the Anatolians, but the Trojans, is they'll line up in their battle lines, and it's not always necessary that the two sides fight. It's almost like taking an average. If your champion is better than the other side's champion, If that's the best guy in your army and he loses,
Yep.
what's the likelihood your army wins? So if you're looking at a situation where you had two pretty evenly matched armies,
Yep.
that would be one way of doing things. Now, this does occur at other points in history later, like with the Vikings and the Celts and the English, where you'd often see Viking champions challenge somebody from across the field. But that seems to have been more of an ego issue and a way to gain renown than it was a way to avoid a wider open conflict.
Yep.
This could have been that. This also could have been a way of saying, all right, we'll let our champions settle it instead. But what you get is that Goliath goes out. He's the champion for the Philistines. And he stood and cried unto the armies of Israel and said unto them, where are ye come out to set your battle in array? Am I not a Philistine, and ye servants to Saul? Choose you a man for you, and let him come down to me. If he be able to fight with me and to kill me, then we will be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then shall ye be our servants and serve us. Which is why this kind of is believed to be Greeks.
Yep.
That's a very Mycenaean thing to do.
Got it.
To say, we don't need to all fight. We can get through this without all of us fighting. I'll send my champion, you send yours. We'll see how this goes.
And what roughly year period is this happening?
We're looking at around 1000 BC.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, there's, I unfortunately have not had the time to sit down and do my usual, specific dating thing.
Yeah.
Like getting Exodus to 1207.
Yep.
I didn't have time to do that with this one. I would like to, and I will try, but at the moment I don't have that.
Yeah.
To give you guys an idea of the geography that we're dealing with, we're fighting this battle basically on the border. Let me see if I can find. Yeah, it's not quite on the border. It's a little bit into Israel, but it's Philistia is to the west and Israel, Judah is to the east.
Got it.
What we're talking about here. Jerusalem, well into Judah. But at the time, not a Jewish controlled, not an Israel-like controlled city. So that's how you know that these aren't necessarily all within Israel.
Got it.
We got into talking about geography and history so that you could talk about giants, by the way.
Thank you.
Oh, of course.
Perfect.
And the Philistines said, I defy the armies of Israel today. Give me a man that we may fight together. When Saul and all Israel heard those words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. Now David was the son of that Ephrathite of Bethlehem, Judah, whose name was Jesse, and he had 8 sons. And the man went among men for an old man in the days of Saul. And the 3 eldest sons of Jesse went and followed Saul to the battle. And the names of his 3 sons that went to the battle were Eliab the firstborn, and the next unto him Abinadab, and the third Shammah. And David was the youngest, and the 3 eldest followed Saul. But David went and returned from Saul to feed his father's sheep at Bethlehem. And the Philistine drew near morning and evening and presented himself 40 days. So for 40 days, these two armies are sitting across from each other. Not a single Israelite wants to go up against the guy that's 9 feet 9 inches tall. Because that's huge.
Yeah.
You might even say giant. So Isaiah, do you want to talk about Goliath?
Yeah, so there's a few places in the Old Testament that giants are mentioned, specifically Nephilim, that are referred to throughout the Old Testament, is referred to. I don't know how many times you and I have run this little train before, but to run it again, they're mentioned in the book of Genesis as being the product of the sons of man, or the sons of God mingling with the daughters of men. Some people take this to mean like people who are of dark magic and evil spirits mixing with good spirits. People take it to literally mean angels copulating with humans. You from the back. Yes, go ahead.
We're in that camp. Well, I'm in that camp.
Oh,
He's
sorry.
along
I
for the
thought you were
ride.
raising like
Yep.
I thought you were like raising your hand like teacher. I have a question.
No, I was raising my hand as in like, no, that's my angle on
Yes,
it.
correct. Yes, yeah.
Aiden's
So
in the
there's a lot-
camp of
there's-
Angel got freaky.
There's a lot of different directions that it heads. Now, it seems that both from historical context and biblical context, that initially, if that's to be believed, the giants would have been wiped out in the flood. However, it seems that they arise again afterwards, because it's mentioned, as I said earlier, in books like Deuteronomy, there's mentions of them mingling among the wicked children. There's talks of them at other parts in the Bible being a parts of other armies. Famously, whenever Moses goes to overlook into the land of Canaan, it says that it is the land of milk and honey, inhabited by giants.
Sons
So
of
there's
Anak.
mentions of them, the sons of Anak, specifically whenever it comes to evil people, they're mentioned. Maybe not all of them, but it's mentioned that there's giants among their ranks. That every now and then there will be one. So we see here that whenever David goes to fight the Philistines, that their champion, the best among them, is one of these giants, it would seem. If that means Goliath is some supernatural creature that exists kind of in a plane of spirituality that was present on earth that isn't present anymore, perhaps. If that means he is just a mighty, or a mighty man, as it's referred to in some parts of the Bible, as a strong man who is one of these giants, who knows? But either way, it seems that Goliath is one of these wicked disciples of whatever the compilation of man and God would be.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's
Thank
it's such a weird episode because of how much it like conflicts with other things that we are given in the Bible. Like, did the flood actually wipe out all the Nephilim? Did some of their bloodline survive? Did more angels come down after that? Did demons do it? Like, you know, what happened? I think it's one of those questions that it probably won't ever get answered in terms of, you know, scripture. But, you know, if you look at Enoch, it has opinions. They're
Don't we know?
translations of a translation of a translation, but they are opinions. So we get to the part where, you know, they're kind of realizing nobody's going to fight this guy. And Jesse said unto David his son, take now for thy brethren an ephah of this parched corn, and these grain, not corn, but corn is the word used here, and these 10 loaves, and run to the camp to thy brethren, and carry these 10 cheeses to the captain of their 1,000, and look how thy brethren fare, and take their pledge. So David rose up early in the morning, and left the sheep with a keeper, and went as Jesse has commanded him, and he came to the trench as the host was going forth to the fight, and shouted for the battle. For Israel and the Philistines had put the battle in array, army against army. They had moved on from the my champion versus your champion phase of, all right, we don't need to do this. We don't need to all die. It could just be one of us. They've moved into the part where they're saying, all right, well, one of us isn't going to beat that guy, so maybe all of us can beat all of them. And so out of the armies of the Philistine, and as he talked with them, behold, there came up the champion, the Philistine of Gath, Goliath. This is as David has just run out to join the armies. Came upon the and as he talked with them, behold, there came up the champion, the Philistine of Gath, Goliath by name, out of the armies of the Philistine, and spake according to the same words, and David heard them. So he says the same thing again, basically, you know, if one of you comes out and fights me, whoever wins wins. And the men of Israel said, have ye seen this man that has come up? Surely to defy Israel is he come up, and it shall be that the man who killeth him, the king will enrich him with great riches, and will make him and will give him his daughter, and make his father's house free in Israel. And David spake to the men that stood by him, saying, what shall be done to the man that killeth this Philistine, and taketh away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine, that he should defy the armies of the living God? So David, at this point, is like, we have God on our side. Why are you worried? What's your problem? This is not... Why are you afraid of something earthly when we have the Lord?
Why are you running? Why are you running?
Literally.
He's tall.
Yeah. Oh, look at this big guy, big man over here.
What'll we do? We only have God.
Yeah, like. And the people answered him after this manner, saying, so shall it be done to the man that killeth him. Basically, you know, it's saying, well, yeah, if somebody kills him, they get all these riches. And Eliab, his eldest brother, heard when he spake unto the men, and Eliab's anger was kindled against David, and he said, why camest thou down hither, and with whom hast thou left those few sheep in the wilderness? I know thy pride, and the naughtiness of thine heart, for thou art come down to that thou mightest see the battle. And David's like, bro, why are you mad at me? What did I do? I was summoned, I came. And his older brothers are like, you don't belong here. You don't, go away. Because again, David's a 15-year-old child who's in charge of playing the harp and tending the sheep. So what's he gonna do? David said, "What have I now done? Is there not a cause?" And he turned from him toward another, and spake after the same manner, and the people answered him again after the former manner. So basically, he turns around away from his brother and goes, "All right, well, talk to these guys then." Long story short, we get to the point where David's ending up fighting Goliath. And Saul said to David, "Thou art not able to go against the Philistine because you're just a kid." David tells Saul that, his servant can handle the sheep. And I love this line. "And David said unto Saul, Thy servant kept his father's sheep, and there came a lion and a bear and took a lamb out of the flock. And I went out after him and smote him, and delivered it out of his mouth. And when he rose against me, I caught him by his beard, and smote him, and slew him. Thy servant slew both the lion and the bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be one of them, seeing he hath defied the armies of the living God." So David, a 15-year-old kid, stands here and says, "I killed a lion with my bare hands because it took a sheep. You think I can't take out this guy? Like, I can kill a lion, I can kill a bear, I can kill a Goliath. It does not matter." And it's not even arrogance, because what he's saying is, I don't have fear because I have God. And everyone seems to be missing this aspect of it when he's talking to them. Everyone's like, "No, you don't get it. He's really big." And David's like, no, you don't get it. God's bigger.
Yeah.
Does it kind of
But
feel like
he's
a Kirk
tall.
Cameron movie? Yes.
Yeah.
But
David, but he's tall. He's right there. He's tall. Look at him. He's bigger
long,
than the
tan,
others.
and handsome.
Yeah, I'm glad you were thinking it too, because I was thinking, I love the fact that David's like just absolutely throwing shade, like he's in an all chat COD lobby
Yep.
in 2012. Like just the full on like uncircumcised just jab about Goliath, I think is hilarious. Obviously, at the time, it's a way to differentiate between the people of the Lord and not. But I just think it's so funny. It's like, oh yeah, that dude, no shot, no shot.
Oh, he's tall. What are we gonna do?
Yep.
You don't get it.
And David is given Saul's armor. He's given a helmet. He gets a coat of armor, which, of course, keep in mind, most of this army on both sides would not have actual armor. They would have been wearing, at the most, leather. But a lot of these guys probably were wearing cloth and bearing wooden shields. Let's see, what do we have here? "And David girded his sword upon his armor, and he essayed to go, for he had not proved it. And David said unto Saul, I cannot go with these, for I have not proved them." What does that mean? He doesn't know what he's doing. He doesn't know how to use a sword. He has no training with this. And so he takes his staff and shows him 5 smooth stones out of the brook, puts them in a shepherd's bag. This is the famous sling that David uses. And then they go down, and they face off against one another. "And the Philistine said unto David, Am I a dog that thou comest to me with staves? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods." So Goliath is standing here like, what do you think this is? I'm wearing armor. You brought a stick? Then David said to the Philistine, "Thou comest to me with a sword and with a spear and with a shield, but I come to thee in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, who thou hast defied." So Goliath is this 9.5-foot tall guy with full armor, full kit. He's standing there looking down. This is all those like paintings that you have, like the one little knight and then a giant somewhere in the distance. Literally that. And Goliath's like, "I will wipe you aside as if you are a fly." And David goes, "I have God." David literally does the "I have the power of God and anime on my side" meme to Goliath.
People are gonna be happy because like 3 different people said that in chat.
Oh, okay,
so,
good.
Yeah.
Yeah. "This day will the Lord deliver thee into mine hand, and I will smite thee, and I take thine head from thee, and I will give the carcass of the host of the Philistines this day unto the fowls of the air, and to the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel."
David went hard.
David had no reason to go this hard, and yet he
No.
did.
Well, he did have a reason.
Well, yeah,
He had
but
God.
Correct. It's interesting listening to this story and comparing it to Saul's first battle, right? because the first time that we see Saul, he's too afraid that God isn't going to show up on time for the military, so he does the offering himself. He's like, God's going to be late. I have to do it right now, and he pays dearly for it.
Mm-hmm.
But now we have a child who's walking out into a battlefield by himself to fight a giant, and he tells everyone around him who tells them otherwise. He's like, you guys aren't getting it. Like, this is far greater than anything the Philistines have in sword. He stands, a 15-year-old boy, but in front of a 10-foot tall giant. The giant says, "You come to fight a giant with sticks," and he said, "You come to fight God with a sword." He's like, "Do you realize?"
Precisely.
I win. What's your problem? And like you read, points to him and says, "Today I'm going to cut off your head. I'm going to take it to the king, and my army and your army is going to see your headless corpse in the field and know that there is a God in Israel." That is the faith that Saul didn't have. That is a man after God's own heart, and that's why David was chosen to be a king even when he was a child.
Exactly. Oh, yeah, and it really is. I mean, the moment here, you don't get a ton of description. It's not this epic battle scene. David's not, batting away Goliath's spear and sword with the staff. Goliath gets up and he starts to make his run towards. And if you've ever seen the movie Troy with Brad Pitt and Orlando Bloom, if you've ever seen that, there's a couple of scenes like this where the two champions kind of like get up, they heft up their spears and armor, jog towards each other, and then engage. That's what you're going to envision here. Goliath gets up, he starts jogging out into the field against David. David gets up and starts sprinting over to Goliath, winds up with this sling. It's not like a slingshot, like a wrist rocket kind of thing. It's a sling like this. Winds up with it and just delivers a single stone right into Goliath's forehead. And he's dead. Just one shot.
One tapped.
Yeah.
Just hit markers.
Quick scoped him.
Yeah. He's one hit, bro. I swear.
Why is David literally in an MW2 lobby? Done.
I'm gonna start keeping these on screen in front of me when I play Call of Duty, and anytime I'm in proximity chat, I'm just gonna read David quotes.
Yes, please.
Off the screen.
There was a guy over in the when David got to the battlefield, he was down, needing revived, crawling around.
Yep.
Like, Goliath, bro, he's one shot. Anywhere, he's dead. Get him.
Oh my god.
Somebody said NFL Fox theme starts to play. Oh my god.
Yep. And so David runs up and stands on top of Goliath, takes Goliath's sword and makes sure to double tap. Just gives him a good stab.
Incredible.
So basically he incapacitates Goliath with a rock and then proceeds to use Goliath's own sword to kill him.
I'm just imagining that they have an army, we have a Hulk.
Yeah.
They have a Goliath, we have a rock.
I got a rock. God, Charlie Brown, the Great Pumpkin.
Love that.
And this is kind of a huge moment because the Philistines have never been defeated by the Israelites in this manner. It's never been this simple. It's always been, a great battle won by sheer force of Israelite will and Saul's leadership as a commander. This is something else entirely. This is one guy just put down what is, as far as they're concerned, just a huge person. Not a single man of the Israelite army volunteered to fight Goliath. David does it with a sling. And the entire point of the book, to this point, to that end, really is faith is more powerful than the sword. Every single time leading up to this that the Israelites have failed, it's because, in battle at least, it's because they did not believe. They did not have faith. They looked across the field and they said, we can't do that. And David has none of that fear.
Yep.
Thoughts?
I don't know why we both grabbed it, but...
it was fun. You both turned at the same time. No, correct. David is true. You think about it from the people of Israel's perspective. Think of it what's the name of that one guy who turns out he's like an advisor for Saul during this time. He becomes David's chief advisor. Starting with the J. It's something.
Abner?
Is it Joab? It might be Joab. I forget. He's a big player in the story of Absalom.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's Joab. It's Joab.
It's Joab. It's not Jonathan.
No, it's not Jonathan's. Yeah, Jonathan, not Saul's son. Jonathan.
Gotcha.
It's let me show. Also, Jonathan. He's another good one for this. But yeah, it's Joab, the Jewish commander under David and Saul. Yeah.
Are you logged in on the Weird Bible account?
Yes.
Okay, I just saw it pop up in chat. I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah.
So Joab is one of Saul's. I think at this time he wasn't his advisor. I think he would have been a military commander. He becomes one of Saul's advisors towards the end of Saul's reign, ends up siding with David, and is like David's right-hand man through most of David's reign. He comes up a lot when it comes to the stories of David's sons and the judges and all of that. But at this time, Joab would have just been a foot soldier. So think about like the position of men like Joab, people who were in this military. They knew they know their God should be the God of Israel, and then the people want a king. Perhaps he even went along with it, but they get a king, and then this king continues to mess up. He doesn't believe God's going to be there for the battle. He disobeys God's orders when it comes to battle, and then a boy shows up in the military. Just a child comes to the front lines and says, "I'm going to go fight that giant that everyone else is afraid to." And they all tell him to back out and do it, but he says, "No, you don't get it. I have God with me." And you watch a child walk out in the battlefield, what should have been a horrific slaughter, how this giant would have killed this boy. And then the boy wins, cuts off his head, holds it up on the battlefield. There has to be a moment for Joab and the men of the army to be like, that's what our king's supposed to be like.
Yep.
Like that child out there who's holding it. Because remember, David's anointing is known by no one except for David, Jesse, and Samuel. No one else in Israel knows that that's the boy that's supposed to be king.
Mm-hmm.
But to see king and his leaders and all the army see this boy defeat the giant like that, I just imagine there had to be a moment of that's what we need more of. And it inspires them to win that battle, but David is at the forefront, or at least a part of every battle that they have after this. And like whenever you get to later in the story, whenever David grows up and the war between the effectively civil war between Saul and David starts, there's no wonder so many military generals choose to go with the child. They choose to side with David against Saul because he was the boy who slayed the giant, not Saul.
He was the one who had the bravery and the courage and the faith, not these other guys.
He is the man after God's own heart, not whatever Saul's doing. And yeah, I think it's I love the story of David and Goliath because what it represents, the dissonance between how David handles himself in his first battle versus how Saul handles himself in his first battle. Seeing how David lifts up the people around him instead of bringing them down to his level, and see how even a child is more of a king than the king himself. It's a beautiful story for a lot of reasons.
Right.
And David's such an interesting person to read about. But yeah, it's cool.
And I'm glad that we got to that point, because if we go any further, then we will be on here all night. So it is time to switch over to the Q&A section of the story, and we will get into the relations between David and Saul, the ensuing civil war, and all of that next month.
Yes. And so just as a reminder, the Super Chats this time around will be organized in a manner of going through the most relevant to this night's stream to least relevant.
Yes.
And they're kind of grouped directly relevant versus biblically relevant, but not necessarily directly relevant to this story. And then more just kind of general Super Chats.
You just really do love organizing things. It's truly incredible.
I enjoy it, yeah. So the first one for the most relevant question thus far is from Nick's Highlander for $2. Says, I like this Saul guy. I hope he does fine. Thoughts?
He doesn't.
Yeah, I'm sure he will. Don't worry about it.
Ben Krajniak for $2 said, dost thou well to be hidden amongst the stuff?
Good one. Good one.
Yeah,
Yes.
they're just that's definitely blasphemy. They're just mixing and matching.
Nick's Highlander for 10 said, Saul hiding reminds me of Roman Emperor Theodosius. Theodosius?
I probably meant Theodosius.
Was it potentially, yeah. The third running away from being crowned as he is a tax collector. Also, some believe he became an iconoclast bishop.
Interesting.
Pumpkin Bear for 49 said, the people standing around with a statue and a smoothie. The council. What you got there? The people. Smoothies. What else? Jack Manson for $5 said, we need to hire the FMAB commercial card announcer to read the titles of the characters of the NKJV.
Oh boy. boy.
Because back when you were talking about the titles or whatever.
Is there anything in there that's a direct question?
We get there. Michael Beacon for $5 said Samuel and Saul are the Chalmers and Skinner of the Bible. The goat verse confirms it.
I don't know what that is a reference to, if I'm being perfectly honest.
Nor do I. Here's a question. This is a comment related to it. The other Korean for $5 said Saul and Samuel in the Drake and Josh Treehouse Door skit. Samuel, Saul, where are the dead sheep?
Oh my gosh.
A lot of good references here. Another one from the other Korean for $5 said, do we have any historical record of what happens to David's brothers? Did they help in court or in the military?
I do not recall. This is my first in-depth reading of Samuel, and I've been going based on what we've got to talk about each night. Isaiah, do you remember?
If I recall correctly, they're all, whenever David becomes king, some of them are dead. And I believe the ones that are still alive become parts of the judges over Israel and like chief leaders and stuff.
Gotcha.
Because there is a mentioned or a few mentions during the stories of Absalom whenever it says that Absalom goes to his uncles in order to balk, which would be brothers. So,
gotcha.
Nick Islander for $5 said Romans had a single duels like three brothers in the kingdom of Era or Is that supposed to be Heracles?
Romans had single duels like the three brothers in the kingdom of Era or Heracles.
I imagine that's supposed to be Heracles?
I don't know. In the kingdom era? What? I'm gonna be honest, Nix, I have no idea what this is asking or saying. Heracles? Is that supposed to be?
That was my guess.
Yeah, but Heracles was Greek, not Roman. I'd maybe pop in chat what that was supposed to.
What you meant?
A bit of a longer explanation there. We can come back to it maybe.
All right, so now we're going to roll through things that are biblically related, but not necessarily directly related to what we're talking about tonight.
Got it.
Ford Gilman for $10 said, what are your thoughts on apostolic system? Apostolic, sorry. As we know, I'm the least educated on the...
Don't let him change you. Keep saying it that way. I like it.
Apostolic?
I said yes. Apostolic. Succession. Did it exist and was lost? It never existed to begin with or is still around. Related, have you read or heard about First Clement?
I've not read First Clement. I have heard of it. If we're talking about the same thing. As far as apostolic succession goes, I sat down with Father Peter, our Orthodox priest friend, a while ago to talk about that. Not for the show, just because I was curious. And his perspective on it definitely made me favor it a little bit more. Unfortunately, I feel like it's often used by, for example, the Catholic Church to basically look down on Protestantism more so than it is any real value, I guess. There is value to tell you what apostolic succession is if you don't know. It's the idea that every single priest from the original apostles down to the current slate of Catholic and Orthodox priests receive their ordination from a bishop who can from a bishop who can trace themselves all the way back in terms of ordination to the original apostles. So, how trustworthy is it to this day in terms of record keeping? There's a solid 300 years where there's really no record keeping in the church. So it's all kind of, do you believe people? So for me, apostolic succession, those 300 years kind of break it for me, because how do you know for certain? I don't know, Isaiah, do you have thoughts?
I'm obviously not I think I've stated before that I'm Protestant, or more specifically Baptist or whatever, so I obviously don't put a lot of
as a Methodist, same.
Yes, correct. Yeah, I understand you're not saying your personal beliefs. You were talking about speaking to a father. But I don't give a ton of credence to the succession of like rulers of the church and like not rulers, but leaders of the church or what have you. Frankly, if it's outside of the The Bible itself, I don't really pay mind to. Like, yeah, I like reading what the church fathers wrote, but I don't treat it as Bible, as like the true and defined word of God. That being said, I have read First Clement's letter, or the first letter of Clement.
Mhm.
And in that, he is describing how a lot of the church's functions should be built.
Mhm.
And it was not my opinion. I know why, like, the churches, like the Orthodox and Catholic Church, treat it as such.
Mhm.
But when I was reading it, I never got the idea that he's talking about some huge, long-term, writing of what a grand church is supposed to be. He is describing to the people at Corinth, like, all right, so after this leader goes, pick out another leader for the church, and then someone else. I don't think he was like, and when we become the global Catholic Church,
Right.
we're going to blah blah blah. I just think I've read it. I don't think that it necessarily applies to that.
Mhm.
And even if he did say something that applied to that, he's still. I really like Clement. He was a great speaker. He died for the cross. One of our
Yeah.
forefathers and all that. But he's still not God.
Yeah.
He's still not Christ speaking how the church should be ordained. So I don't give a ton of credence to it. Basically, cool guy though. I like Clement.
And yeah, if you look at early Christianity too, the thing is, yeah, you had your bishops and your priests, but you also had presbyters, you also had elders. Like there was a whole different way of doing things, and you start to see the emphasis on apostolic succession as the Catholic Church becomes more and more powerful. They don't seem to care that much prior, and that's why you have these huge arguments in the early church, with Tertullian, who was a Montanist, and then you have Cyprian, who of course follows Tertullian in the same bishopric, in the same place, and has very different views. And then you've got, Arius and St. Nicholas and all of these different groups and people who couldn't agree on even the function of the Trinity, let alone how a church should be structured. So the early version of Christianity was very disjointed, very much regional, very sectarian. The idea of the Catholic or Orthodox churches in their current set of beliefs existing in AD 33 is complete nonsense, just to put it bluntly.
Cool. Just rolling back to Nick Silender's question, he said, Heraclius is a Byzantine or Eastern Roman emperor. Going back to that question.
Don't know a ton about him.
Okay. And it was the question about Romans had single duels, or was more of a statement.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not surprised. They'd probably, it wasn't a specifically Greek thing, but for the time we're talking about, it is a pretty Greek thing.
Yeah, that's fair. From, what was it? Wizza11 for $9.99 said, hey, love your videos, guys. If you could go back in time and meet Jesus, what would you ask him?
Oh my gosh. Do you have one on hand?
I get one.
Greedy.
I really I'd ask him anything. I think I'd just be overwhelmed, I get one question to ask the creator.
Yeah.
Like,
I think it would be pretty simple. Something like, what would you have me do?
That would be the best option, I think. Yeah, that's definitely the Solomon answer of wisdom. What can I do? Am I doing okay? Like, what do you ask? But why does matter do this with that? Like, no, I don't.
How do magnets work?
Yeah, like he's got all that. I'm just fine with everything operating the way he has. Like, yeah, what would you have me do? Yeah,
I think, yeah.
My instinct, I'm curious what you guys think of this question is, my question would be, will we get there?
What do you mean, will we get there? Like heaven?
No. Like, will humanity get to where we should and could be?
We kind of have an answer for that one in Revelation.
No.
Not an answer you're gonna like.
Yeah, fair.
Some of us do.
Some of us.
Fair.
And it's not gonna be fun getting there. It's gonna be an unfortunate situation.
Shame.
It's gonna be a lot of plagues and earthquakes, droughts and famines and dragons and third of the stars being cast from the sky. It's a whole thing.
It's gonna be a wild ride. Next is from Pullout King for $5, and he says, pardon my username, but congratulations on your engagement, Isaiah. Also, y'all have brought me closer to God with your work. You've saved me. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. Pull out king.
Danny Goo for $10 said, "I'd like to thank Wendy for instilling respect of God in me. Then this podcast went on to make me accept Christianity, as it resonates with my own craving for being what I now see as more Christ-like." So
Very cool. Thank you very much. That means the world. Happy to hear
It
that.
really does.
Judgment Kazi for $10 said, as a non-Christian, you guys have given me a whole new respect for the faith and the cool stories / concepts it explores. P.S. Congrats on the engagement. Guess the Wendosi is off the market for good.
I'm sorry. That is my fault. That is my fault. That is
It's always your fault,
entirely. That's
Aiden.
fair. That's a good point. My fault we got lost in the woods. It was my fault.
No, you guys
My
were
fault I fell
deliberating
in the
together.
river.
Yeah, but then I think everybody fell
I
in
think
that
all
river.
three of us did at one point get in the creek a little bit.
So
Yeah, we all fell in at different. It was like dominoes. Yeah.
Yep.
We all fell in at some point.
it was
very,
bound to happen, yeah.
Yeah. It was cute.
It was. Danny Goo for $5 said, "Question: How can one become more Christ-like? I've binged the podcast for 3 days now, and I was wondering how I can be more worthy."
I mean the answer that Christ gives is basically to imitate him. That's the answer Paul gives for sure. Paul is very proud of himself at some points, for how Christ-like he is. But yeah, I mean the basics of it without taking it to the extent that you've got to give up all of your possessions and wander around explaining to people why Christ is God and how you can be saved, which would be quite literally Christ-like. You get a lot of basic information, a lot of simple things. Always, be honest, tell the truth, be humble, be respectful. Don't keep too much for yourself. There's of course the line that it is easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter heaven. Of course, that's referring to the gates of a city and a camel being laden with goods. Not a specific needle itself. So the allegory actually does make sense. It's very narrow gates. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's really read the book, see what Christ does, see what he says, and just try to follow it. Do your best and accept the fact that you probably will stumble. And stumbling does not mean that you have completely failed. It does not mean that you're doomed to an eternity of suffering. It just means recognizing what you've done wrong and trying to be better. Christ doesn't tell people, you're forgiven, go do whatever you want, and then come back to me when you're sorry again. He says, you are forgiven, go and sin no more.
That's pretty good, yeah.
Love it. Brandon B for $20 said, "Serious question, kinda. If I sold my soul to the devil in exchange for him to say sorry to God, what would happen?"
If you sold your soul to the devil in order for him to apologize to God?
So I think he's trying to say, if I sold my soul to get Lucifer to kiss and make up, what would happen?
He would take your soul and not kiss and make up. This whole thing is dishonesty and misleading you.
This guy.
I'm not even sure that you could sell your soul to Satan. I'm not sure that's even a thing you can do.
There you go. Made it Reinhardt for 200.
Oh,
thank you, number one.
so to
very
be
much.
clear, as you
Appreciate
can tell, the $200 super chat got answered 20 minutes into the Q&A section. So clearly, we do not use money to make these decisions.
No bias here.
I'm being completely sincere there.
Yeah. Evening, boys. Congrats on the engagement, Wendigoon. Hope it goes well. Aidens, are you actually going to make a God Hates the IRS shirt? I would buy that in a heartbeat. Also, what's y'all's favorite psalm?
I'll probably put that one on Unqualified Apparel, not on the Lore Lodge channel, but I am considering God Hates the IRS going on a t-shirt. He does hate tax collectors. Well, he doesn't hate them. It's more, he doesn't approve of it. God doesn't hate anybody. God loves everybody, but he doesn't approve of everything we do, But yeah, tax collectors are kind of picked out very specifically as being bad in the Bible. Like, you've got all this stuff. You're like, the murderers and the adulterers and the baby killers and the tax collectors.
God's a capitalist, confirmed.
Yeah, the tax collectors do not get a good rap. As for favorite psalm, I can't say that I have one.
If you don't have one, I definitely don't. Isaiah?
I'd have to look through again.
A favorite psalm?
Yes.
Mhm.
A book of Psalms?
From the Book of
Yes.
Psalms.
Like chapters? 51's good. Obviously 23.
51.
But yeah, let's say 23.
I'll read 23 for the people when I find it.
Okay.
Well, Psalm 23 is the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me by the path of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. I'll stop, but yeah, you can keep going. But
Well, you missed one line in your incredibly impressive recitation
all right,
of Psalm
all right,
23.
fine.
What's that?
The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He restoreth my soul, and leadeth me beside
there it is.
water.
You missed. He leadeth me
Yeah.
beside the still waters.
The waters.
You imperfect fool. How dare you?
Leadeth me down the worms I have for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Surely thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
Yeah, that's impressive.
There you go, yeah. That's my favorite one.
Oh, yeah, do me like that right now. Although, fun fact, that Valley of the Shadow of Death is not a metaphor. He's actually talking about the plain of Gehenna, which is just south of Jerusalem. Like, that's an actual place.
Interesting.
That's where they would go and give up the sacrifices to Baal, the child sacrifices.
Okay.
Yeah, that's where the Canaanites would do that, where some of the cultists would do that. So that's an actual physical location that he's talking about.
Mhm.
That was known for being kind of like infested with demonic energy because of all the child sacrifice.
Interesting.
Yeah.
The next one is from Saul Gordman for $10.
You guys in the gourd meat. Oh my lord, these are good.
It's so great.
Oh, Lord, man. That's
Yep.
great. That's fantastic.
Says, congrats on the engagement, Mr. Goon. Also, please don't ban me
Thank
for
you.
working at the company that publishes the NLT. If it helps, we publish KJV2 and biblical manga. So,
Biblical manga.
yeah.
All right. Interesting.
I mean, I hope it's not blasphemously biblical mod.
The chances are low.
Yeah.
The next question from Noah Isaac for $5 says, what is your opinion on biblical manga? So I guess
I've never read a biblical manga. I'm gonna be honest, I've never read a manga, so what I know about them is that they typically have some lewd content.
doth the Bible not?
It's not glorified on the occasion it is in there.
Fair, yeah. I guess manga does kind of glorify that,
Yeah,
doesn't it?
I don't know. I've never read a biblical manga. I have my concerns. I'll put it that way. About you, Isaiah, any thoughts on biblical manga?
I'm gonna keep those to myself for now.
I mean, we have a no anime rule in our Discord server, so I think that tells you what you need to know.
Yeah, that's fair. Where are we? The next one is from Nathaniel McCoy for $10, saying, these streams make my week even if I can't always catch them live. Congrats on the engagement, Wendigoon. Was ecstatic to hear about it.
Thank you. That means a lot.
They're all
Appreciate
very excited for you.
it. Also ecstatic to hear about it.
Sung Wakong for $5 said, do you guys know why in the Catholic Church you go to confessionals instead of asking God for forgiveness and confessing to God directly?
So you see, there's this cute little thing called the Protestant Reformation, and it pretty well describes how I feel about the concept of confession.
Yeah, there is no biblical foundation for going and telling a priest about your sins so they can tell you you're forgiven. That's not in the Bible. That is one of those things that the Catholic Church just kind of said, hey, you got to do this. There's a lot of things that the Catholic Church said, hey, you just got to do this, and that is one of them.
To be fair, I can see the psychological benefit of that, because getting direct forgiveness from God through a priest has a more immediate effect, or a more tangible effect to give people that solace, even if it's not necessarily.
So 90% of the stuff that
Go ahead, Catholic boy. Go ahead.
Shut up! I'm not defending it. I'm not defending it.
So the thing is, about 90% of the stuff in Catholicism that you look at and you go, that's weird, comes from the medieval period and from a population that was almost entirely illiterate and spent most of their time farming. So there was a utility to it in that if you had to go to the priest and tell him what sins you committed that week, you were at least going to church and getting advice from a priest. But it goes from being, there's a lot of these things with Catholic history where it goes from being something that is largely beneficial and understandable as a way to bring the Bible to people who can't read it, but it kind of spirals out of control after a few hundred years in basically every instance. And the Reformation, keep in mind, was at no point an attempt to, at least Martin Luther's intentions, were never to split from the Catholic Church. He never wanted to do that. The goal all along for Martin Luther was to get the Catholic Church to go, all right, you know what? We made some new rules a few hundred years ago. They're not really relevant anymore, and they don't have scriptural basis. Let's fix that. And the Catholic Church instead declared him a heretic. What else?
Are we leaving it there? Okay.
I think so.
Sounds good. The next one is from Yafido for a Canadian $5 saying, congrats on the engagement. How do y'all feel about seraph being dragons? Their name can mean fire snake, and they have some similarities to dragons.
You're the one that did the video on all the different classifications of angels.
Just questions that come in like that. It's like, hey man, congrats on the engagement. Really appreciate it. Do you think that angels are dragons?
Yeah, I mean, well, I will say, to an extent, Satan is described as having the form of a dragon at a few times. I think Michael is as well. I mean, taking the form of a dragon, sure. We know that angels can shapeshift. But, I mean, I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, you could maybe argue that some of the old depictions of dragons came from, like, themes that come from the Old Testament and stuff like that. Like, images of thrones and stuff taken from Ezekiel could have been incorporated into other cultures' lore and history. Maybe in, like, a sense like that, but I don't think angels are dragons.
Nah,
I love that I get to say phrases like that
on
this podcast, and they mean something. They're not just word soup.
I mean, I'm thinking about it, and I'm like, all right, dragons have wings, and they breathe fire.
I mean, maybe some lore was like incorporated off of ideas and concepts from the Bible. That's possible.
Yeah, I would venture to say that angels are not dragons, although it seems like the really, really powerful ones are described as dragons, but I wouldn't say that they're necessarily physically like what's on the flag.
Yeah, just go ahead and ban whoever said that.
Well, and my only hang up is that dragons surfaced in literature from a variety of different cultures that had not even been touched by Christianity for up until like a few hundred years ago.
Yeah.
So
there's also like the term dragon is a lot of people take dragon and they think about what's on the flag of Wales.
Yep.
Which I don't know where it is. We have one here.
Over there.
No, I don't know.
Down there.
Okay, yeah. So dragon is in like the four-legged reptile with the big wings and all that. There's so many different depictions of what a dragon is throughout the world that pegging any one thing as a dragon. I mean, you get drake, wyvern, worm, like all these different things. What else we got? Ryan Whitcop.
Yep, Ryan Wickett for $5. Say, congratulations, Isaiah, and thank you guys for bringing me back into the faith. It's turned my life around so much, and I'm far happier and less anxious.
Oh,
yeah.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Thank you.
4K Snuff for $10 said, thank you guys for this amazing content. It helps me get through my night shift job. I'll keep my personal problems out of it, but what does God say of self-hatred?
Well, thank you for the question, 4K Snuff.
Was curious if we were going to let that one slide or not.
What does God say about self-hatred? You're not supposed to hate yourself, but it's not it's not necessarily I'm having a hard time putting the words together on this one. If you might have something better to say about it.
Well, I was gonna say it's not that it's wrong in a sense that you're less of a Christian or less of a person for doing it, but God wants better for you than that. There's a lot of God talks about we're made in His image. We are supposed to be to be effective Christians. We're supposed to be a testament of that of what God's been in our lives. So if someone sees a Christian who is in a sense of self-hatred or down on themselves, then that someone isn't going to see a stranger isn't going to see a person like that and think, oh, I want whatever he's got. I want God in my life. We're supposed to be a representative of what God has for us. But that's the only way you could see it as a wrong in any sense. Maybe not being your best. At the end of the day, God wants what's best for you in your life. And to truly hate yourself is something that it wouldn't necessarily make God angry, but I do think that it would make God sad because He wants more for us than that. While not wrong, I think we can do better.
Yeah.
And as a Christian, of course, we're going to run into problems with ourselves and with others around us. But at the end of the day, we are creatures made in the image of the Creator. In order to achieve happiness and and to further His work here on Earth, at the end of the day, we may hate ourselves and get down on ourselves, but for who we are and what we are, I think that's a beautiful thing and something that can give us hope, even if we may not have enough hope for ourselves. I think that God's enough hope that we can pull ourselves out of it. So yeah, what Aiden said, I wouldn't call it a sin, but God wants better for us, for sure.
Nice. Pumpkin Bear 7 for $4.99 said, first pop culture god I think of is Chuck from Supernatural. They named an Abrahamic god Chuck Shirley.
Yes, they did. And then proceeded to make him very much not like the God of the Bible.
Yep. To be fair, a lot of that show is not biblically accurate.
I appreciate it for bringing elements of Christian stories to a broader audience. I would not use it as a guide to Christianity.
That's a silent agreement from Isaiah, it looks like.
Norberto Rodriguez?
Yep. Norberto Rodriguez for $5 said, what do the names of the Bible mean, and from where do the archangels not named in the Bible get their name aside from the Book of Enoch?
When you say the names of the Bible, that is a very broad question. Do you mean the names of the chapters? Do you mean the names of the books, the characters,
I think they're saying the names of the angels in the Bible.
Gotcha.
Where do those come from?
I mean, a lot of them have the word El in them, which means high, like high or God. So a lot there is that aspect, which is very common. Raphael, Gabriel, Michael, Samael. All these different angels have El in it, and that seems to denote that they are, in fact, angels. Of course, God himself is El. He is El. Everybody else is attached to him. So that's about all I know as far as the naming goes. I believe each of their names then continues to have some sort of meaning on its own. Like, I think Michael means, like, warrior of God or something, right?
That makes sense.
Like, sword of God. It's something like that, I think.
Michael is, I think it's sword.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure. Something of God. I'm pretty sure it's sword.
Yeah. So I don't, off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you what all the other ones mean. But I can look into it. That would be a good subject for a Weird Bible channel video.
Yeah, absolutely. Heavy Birdman for $2 said, she's a 10 out of 10, but her name is Bathsheba.
Basically, what happened.
Yep. Norberto Rodriguez Jr. for $2 said, what would God say about firearms?
If ye have not a sword, sell your cloak and buy one. I think that is pretty straightforward.
Yep. The Odd Pickle for $4.99 said, am I wrong for not going to church? I study from the Bible from home as I felt unwelcomed at the church. I tried several churches with the same feeling.
I mean, I do not regularly attend church.
No, do
I? Part of that is because the Methodist Church is currently going through a bit of a disagreement about homosexuality. as well as a number of other things that kind of bubbled to the surface. So Methodist churches aren't a great place to be right now. However, whenever there are, I think it's 3 or more gathered in the name of the Lord, he is present, is the rule.
I don't know if I'd call it a rule, but there is a verse about that, yes.
What I'm trying to say is that if you and a few friends get together on a Sunday, even if it's over the internet, and do a Bible study, I think that would probably...
Does this count?
It's not Sunday.
Don't.
Okay.
I was afraid he'd bring that up. Don't wish that on us.
No, I'm not saying that's what this is. This is not church.
The number of jokes we make do not.
But yeah, I would say if, first of all, if you feel unwelcome, I don't know why you might feel unwelcome. There could be any number of reasons. I would recommend, if you want to go to a service and feel like you're fulfilling that obligation to go to church, Orthodox churches are probably some of the best to go to. They're structured, they are beautiful, and they tend to avoid modern politics and things like that, and talk more about the actual Bible and the Scripture, and lessons about self-fulfillment and following God. Not so much you're probably not going to go to an Orthodox church and get a sermon about the validity of homosexuality, if that makes sense. You're going to go and get, here's what it means to have the Holy Spirit within you in the context of something that happened in Acts. Cool. So at the very least, get a Bible study together. At the very, if you feel like you can go to a church, if you have the time, then, feel like you can deal with perhaps hearing some things that you might not love, then I would pick an Orthodox church personally.
Yep. And just heads up for everybody, we're going to be wrapping up with these last few questions here, so we can close out at about 9:30.
And I do, once we get to 9:30, I just really quickly want to say something.
Sure.
Yeah.
Next is Jack Garcia for 99. That sounded way too fast. Yeah. I've been a Baptist pastor's kid my entire life, and y'all have helped me in my Christianity tremendously.
Thank you.
Also, KJV Goon Gang for life. Also, can y'all reply to my Insta DM?
I will check what it is. The most efficient way to reach me, if you really want an answer, is Patreon, because I am being paid to answer those, or Cameo for the same reason. Otherwise, I try to get to stuff, but we got like 200 emails and 99 DMs.
Yeah, there's too much stuff.
I don't even check TikTok DMs anymore.
Fair.
Thousands.
Pookie Trooper for $5 said, okay, but where would you want to go to eat with Jesus? I know my answer.
Where?
Olive Garden.
Oh my gosh.
I want to show him the unlimited breadstick.
All right, you're fired. You managed to get fired and hung up on within half a second of each other just now.
That one hurt me more.
Yeah, because I tell you, you're fired like once a week now.
Yeah, sure.
Honestly, I'd probably just make some sandwiches and go sit on a hillside and talk.
Fair.
I don't want to take Jesus anywhere near seed oils.
Fair. Isaiah, thoughts? You can't say Olive Garden. I took that one already.
Man. There it goes. What will I do? I don't. Where would I take him to eat? Let's say a soup kitchen. There, that's where he'd want to
Actually,
go.
you know
There
what?
you
That's
go.
a good answer.
There you go. Boom. I win. Continue.
Nick Islander for $5 said, are you going to cover more extra biblical resources like Gospel of Judas or Mary or Judas?
Maybe, but it will not be positive.
I look forward to it then.
It will not be a positive assessment of those works.
Another one from Nick Islander for $2 said, can't wait for the podcast of the Songs o' Solomon.
That's going to be one that I have to go and read because it's not in the KJV.
Fair.
I've read it.
What? The songs?
Song of Solomon.
Songs of Solomon?
I don't think so.
KJV.
Is
What are
it?
you talking about? Yes. We're gonna fight right here.
Is it really?
Yes. 13 Keys, 1st Chronicles, Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther, Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes. It's right after Ecclesiastes. It's right before Isaiah, yeah. So it's in between Ecclesiastes and Isaiah.
In between Ecclesiastes and Isaiah. In my KJV, Solomon is right before Isaiah.
Yeah, so that's the Songs of Solomon.
Oh, okay. Well,
yeah.
no, I'm thinking of Wisdom of Solomon.
Oh, yeah, the wisdom is just in the wisdom is exclusively in the Catholic and Orthodox.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of. My bad. But yeah, we'll get there.
Cool. Noska J177 or 117, sorry for Friday, said tattoos are mentioned in the Bible as something that is prohibited. I haven't read into it much. Opinions?
I have a tattoo. Is that where are tattoos banned?
Leviticus.
Yeah, that's specific to a certain place and time.
Fair.
That's my answer to that. Is, you know, I mean, I would like to believe that when I get up there, God's not going to look at the words on my arm that say I am not afraid and tell me I can't go to heaven. So
fair. Thoughts?
Oh yeah, I'm pretty neutral about them. I don't have any, but I don't mind them. So
fair. We got two more. Heavy Broman for $5 said, "Are the 7 deadly sins biblical? If not, can they still be used as a solid guide of what not to do as a Christian?"
There's not really a lot of. So the reason the 7 deadly sins are such a big deal is because it's worded in Proverbs. It says the 7 sins which God hates, and then it names them. And then it says, in all manner, look upon yourself with long suffering. And then it says 7 other sins God also hates, and says other things that are unrelated. And it talks about, and it says 7 other sins that God also hates. So it's literally just like listing out sins of man and how we can be better for him.
The
and
multiples
the
of 7 deadly
like,
sins.
This is the framework. This is it. Like these 7, that's all that matters. So it became a much bigger thing in Catholic theology than it was ever meant to be. In the Bible. So, should you try to abstain from things like pride, lust, gluttony? Yes, absolutely. They're good things to try not to do, but they're not like the backbone as a lot of religions kind of, or a lot of Christian denominations kind of pin them as. They're really, I mean, they're important in that they're sins, but they're not that important. They're not the only ones. So,
yeah.
I love that the way you phrased it sounded like a dermatology ad next to articles on Forbes. 7 other sins God hates.
That's true, yeah.
So good.
And then ads at the bottom of the page.
Yeah, exactly. Last one is going to be from Young Volio for $5 and said, Aiden and Aiden are the biblically accurate Sam and Dean.
What a one to end it on.
Does
that make me Castiel?
What?
Oh my god, it does.
I think it does, yeah.
Oh,
or Bobby.
Yeah. Do I die? Okay, cool. Thanks.
I'm gonna
be fair, everybody in that show dies.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It sucks for him.
True. Yeah, so I mean that'll bring us to the end of the questions because it's already 9:30. It's been 2.5 hours. But I do, before the show ends, want to quickly say something about a man I respect a lot who passed away last week. For those who watch our show a lot, you've probably heard me reference Dr. Michael Heiser. He was a biblical scholar, Old Hebrew scholar, and behind a serious revival of interest in the supernatural aspects of the Bible, angels, demons, the unseen realm, the hidden war between God and hell that is constantly raging around us. He was involved in debunking a lot of the 12th planet stuff from Zecharia Sitchin. Truly just an incredible mind and somebody I had hoped to have the opportunity to speak to one day, but he had pancreatic cancer and unfortunately passed away last week. So I'm pretty heartbroken about that one because his work has been so incredibly important to me, but also I'm happy for him that he gets to finally find out if he was right. He gets to ask those questions himself now. So, rest in peace to an absolute somebody I think will be looked at the same way that we look at some of the all-time great doctors of the church. So just wanted to say that because, man, he really just changed the way I see so much. But Isaiah, any parting thoughts?
I will say thank you to everyone who wished me congratulations on the engagement. That means the world. I am very happy and couldn't be happier with Kayla, and it means a lot to hear the support from her. So thank you for everyone who donated or just said it in the chat. That means a lot. Thank you. I'm a very blessed man.
All right, I guess that is it, and we will be back in a month. Thank you all for watching. Bye, guys.
Bye.